Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
My son-in-law invited everyone on a family vacation except me. He said, "We only have enough money for tickets for us and my parents." My daughter added, "And we need a break from you." I just smiled and said, "Okay, enjoy your vacation." When they checked into the hotel, I was already there, but not as a guest, but as the owner. I set the table with the good dishes, the ones Margaret and I received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. White porcelain with a thin gold rim. Only 3 pieces chipped after all this time. The evening light came through the curtains. Same ones we'd hung in 1998, casting everything in amber. I'd made Jennifer's favorite pot roast with carrots and potatoes. The recipe her mother perfected before the cancer took her. The name card sat at each place setting, carefully printed. Small touches mattered. They arrived 20 minutes late. Kevin pushed through the door first. Jennifer trailing behind with her phone already out. His parents followed. Patricia in a silk blouse that probably costs more than my monthly electric bill. Dennis in a blazer with gold buttons. They looked around my dining room like tourists in a museum of poverty. Robert. Kevin's handshake was brief, dismissive. "Thanks for having us." "Of course. Please sit. Dinner's ready." I'd positioned everyone carefully. Jennifer to my right, Kevin beside her, his parents across. The head of the table remained mine at least. I brought out the roast on Margaret's serving platter, steam rising, the smell filling the small room. "This looks quaint," Patricia said, her eyes scanning the walls, the dated wallpaper, the framed photos of Jennifer at various ages. "I'm glad the promotion came through, Jennifer. You worked hard for it." She barely glanced up from her phone. These things happen when you network properly. The word stung more than she knew. I'd made 3 calls to former business associates, spent 2 hours on the phone with a hotel chain executive who owed me a favor, all to ensure her application reached the right desk. She thought it was her networking. Kevin reached for the wine bottle I'd brought, a 2015 Napa Cabernet I'd selected specifically for tonight. $60 I probably shouldn't have spent. He examined the label, eyebrows raised, and what might have been approval. "Now, this is a decent vintage. Finally, something worth drinking in this place." He poured for Patricia first, then Dennis, then Jennifer. The bottle moved around the table in a careful circle, skipping my glass entirely before Kevin set it down at the far end, well out of my reach. Jennifer watched this happen. She said nothing. "Kevin has such refined taste," Patricia said, sipping. We raised him to appreciate quality. Dennis leaned back in his chair, studying my dining room with the expression of an appraiser at an estate sale. "Robert, have you considered updating? We just redid our kitchen. Granite countertops, stainless appliances, the resale value alone." "These are wonderful curtains," Patricia interrupted, reaching out to touch the fabric between her thumb and forefinger like she was testing its thread count. "They must be 20 years old?" "They work fine," I said. Kevin shifted his chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood. He repositioned himself to create more distance between us, angling toward his parents, forming a wall with Jennifer in the middle. She turned her body to match his orientation, her back partially to me now. I passed the potatoes. Kevin took the bowl without looking at me. "So big announcement," he said, grinning at his parents. "We're doing a family vacation, St. Thomas, week long. Me, Jen, Mom, Dad, leaving the 21st. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "That sounds wonderful. What resort?" "Paradise Cove, 5-star private beach, the works." He was animated now, gesturing with his wine glass. "My wine." We only had budget for 5 tickets. Us and my parents. The mathematics of that statement hung in the air. 5 tickets. 4 people listed. The exclusion was deliberate, calculated. "I can cover my own expenses," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'd love to join the family." Jennifer's phone slid across the table toward Patricia. Vacation photos loading on the screen. Jennifer turned further away from me, leaning in to point at resort amenities. When she spoke, she didn't look at me. "We need a break from you, Dad." The room contracted. Patricia and Dennis suddenly found their plates fascinating. Kevin jumped in quickly, his tone falsely apologetic. "It's not personal, Robert. Just you know how it is. Quality time with the immediate family." My hand had been reaching for the serving dish. I watched it freeze midair, detached like it belonged to someone else. Slowly, I lowered it to my lap. The pot roast sat untouched on my plate, congealing in its own juices. Of course, I heard myself say, I understand. I stood, the chair scraping back. Let me get dessert. Nobody protested. Kevin was already refilling the wine glasses, everyone's but mine. As I walked to the kitchen, my plate was still full. Through the doorway, I heard Patricia asking about spa packages. Dennis suggesting golf excursions. Jennifer's laugh, light and easy, the way it used to sound when she was 12 and I'd take her for ice cream after school. I didn't get dessert. I walked past the kitchen, down the hall, up the stairs to my bedroom. Behind me. The conversation continued without pause, without my absence even registering. I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the same jacket I'd worn to Jennifer's wedding, the same one I'd worn to her promotion dinner last month, the same jacket Kevin's family had just mocked. Through the floor, I heard more laughter, the clink of glasses, my wine, my table, my home, their celebration. Something shifted then, precise and cold, like tumblers falling into place inside a lock. The house settled into silence around 10 o'clock. I heard doors closing downstairs. They were staying in the guest rooms, of course. Too much wine to drive home safely. My wine. I sat on the bed's edge, jacket finally removed, draped over the chair. The same chair where I laid out my clothes that morning, hopeful this dinner would bring us closer. Sleep wasn't coming. I knew that already. I removed my reading glasses, cleaned them with my shirt hem, put them back on. The bedroom looked the same as it had for 20 years. Margaret's jewelry box still sat on the dresser, empty now, everything inside sold to pay for her final hospital bills that insurance wouldn't cover. Jennifer had been 23 then, fresh out of college, crying at the funeral. I'd held her hand through the entire service. When did her hand let go of mine? The memories came in fragments, non-linear, each one sharp. The wedding, $35,000. Most of my savings at the time. Jennifer in her dress, radiant. Kevin beside her, looking vaguely uncomfortable in his tuxedo. I'd written the check, thinking, this is what fathers do. This is love made tangible. The car. $15,000 for the down payment on their Tesla. The one they drove past me last Christmas without stopping, heading to Kevin's parents for dinner. Just a loan, Dad. We'll pay you back. That was 4 years ago. I'd stopped asking about repayment after the first year. The furniture for their first apartment. The emergency roof repair they couldn't afford. The credit card bill $8,000 that Kevin explained away as temporary cash flow issues. Every time I'd written the check. Every time Jennifer would hug me and say, "You're the best, Dad." I stood restless, and walked to my home office down the hall. The laptop sat on the desk, password protected, containing a life my daughter knew nothing about. I opened it, entered the code, watched the screen illuminate. 4 properties. The hotel in Tampa bought in 2008 when the market crashed, renovated, turned profitable within 18 months. The boutique inn in Sarasota, acquired in 2012. 2 bed and breakfasts in St. Augustine, purchased as a pair in 2019. All managed through Wilson Holdings LLC, all generating steady income, all completely invisible to my family. Current total value, $3.2 million. I'd built this empire quietly, deliberately after Margaret died. Working double shifts at the hospital where I'd been a facilities manager, saving every extra dollar, learning real estate investment through night classes and weekend seminars. The LLC was registered under my middle name, Thomas, to keep it separate, private. I told Jennifer I was taking on extra work to stay busy. She'd never asked for details. I opened my spreadsheet. $70,000. That was the conservative estimate of what I'd given them over 12 years, not counting tonight's dinner, not counting the phone calls I'd made to secure her promotion. $70,000. And they needed a break from me. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, I walked to Jennifer's childhood bedroom. The guest room now stripped of most personal items, but a few photos remained on the wall. Jennifer at 8, gap-toothed hugging me at Disney World. Jennifer at 16, holding her first place debate trophy, my arm around her shoulders. Jennifer at 21, college graduation. Her smile genuine and proud. I touched the frame. The glass was cool under my fingertips. When had that girl disappeared, dawn came slowly, gray light creeping through the windows. Around 7, I heard voices downstairs. Low, conversational. Jennifer and Kevin awake early talking in the kitchen. I moved to the hallway barefoot, staying close to the wall. The old house had good acoustics if you knew where to stand. At the top of the stairs, their voices carried clearly. We just need to approach it right. Jennifer's voice, that careful tone she used when manipulating situations at work. Make him think it's his idea. He's sitting on equity he doesn't need. Kevin, dismissive as always. This house is way too big for one person. I pressed my back against the wall, listening. He's stubborn about it, Jennifer continued. But if we frame it as simplifying his life, the old man doesn't have expensive taste anyway. Probably be happier in a one-bedroom. Jennifer's laugh, small, complicit. He did wear that same jacket to my promotion dinner and my wedding. I looked back toward my room where that jacket hung on the chair. Same one. She was right. Once we get the house sold, Jennifer said, her voice gaining confidence. We can pay off the cards and maybe look at that bigger place in Winter Park. Your dad won't even notice the difference. He'll just be happy to help the family. Kevin's tone twisted the phrase into mockery. Help the family. The family that needed a break from me. The family planning to convince me to sell my home, Margaret's home, so they could upgrade theirs. I returned to my bedroom with the same careful precision I'd used to approach the stairs. Closed the door silently, sat at my desk, opened the laptop again. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. They should have shaken. Instead, they typed Paradise Cove Resort, St. Thomas for sale. The listing loaded. Luxury beachfront property, 80 rooms, private marina, established clientele. Asking price $1.85 million. The photos showed pristine beaches, infinity pools, couples drinking cocktails at sunset, the same resort where my daughter planned to vacation without me, funded by my wine money, my dinner hospitality, my endless forgiveness. I opened my leather journal, the one where I tracked my hotel acquisitions, wrote financial notes, planned expansions. On a fresh page, I wrote the number, $1850,000. Then I wrote August 16th. Then I wrote Paradise Cove. My handwriting was steady, precise. I stared at those words for a long moment, then checked the property details again. Owner retiring, motivated to sell. Closing possible within 60 days. Contact Martin Reeves, Commercial Properties International. Downstairs, Jennifer and Kevin were probably making coffee now, planning their pitch to get me to downsize, to simplify, to free up money for the family. I looked at my laptop screen at that resort glowing in Caribbean sunshine and something crystallized in my chest. Not rage. Rage was too hot, too chaotic. This was colder, sharper. This was clarity. I pulled up my business bank account, the one Jennifer didn't know existed. Available liquid assets after reserving operating capital. $2.1 million. Paradise Cove Resort, St. Thomas, I said aloud to my empty room. For sale $1.85 million. I wrote it again in my journal, underlining it twice. The sun was fully up now, light streaming through those old curtains Patricia had mocked. Downstairs, my daughter was planning to take my home. In 10 days, she'd be lying on a beach I was forbidden to visit, drinking cocktails I was deemed unworthy to share. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. The laptop screen still glowed with Paradise Cove's listing when dawn broke fully. I'd been at this desk for hours, coffee growing cold in the mug beside me. Sleep seemed irrelevant now. My body ran on something sharper than caffeine. Purpose maybe, or the clarity that comes when you finally stop pretending. I heard movement downstairs around 8. Jennifer's footsteps. Familiar rhythm after 35 years, heading toward the kitchen. I waited 3 minutes, then followed. She stood at the counter pouring coffee, still in her pajamas, hair pulled back. I'd set out her preferred creamer earlier. French vanilla, the expensive kind. Small details. I still knew them all. Morning, I said, reaching for a mug. Hey. She didn't look up from her phone. I poured slowly, measuring my tone. Kevin mentioned you're taking a trip soon somewhere tropical. St. Thomas, Paradise Cove Resort. We leave next week. Sounds lovely. How long week? The 21st through 28th. She sipped her coffee, scrolling through something on her screen. She didn't ask if I'd reconsidered joining. The exclusion was settled fact not worth revisiting. Well, enjoy it, I said. You've been working hard. Thanks. She glanced up briefly, almost surprised by the sentiment, then returned to her phone. Kevin Unk's voice carried from upstairs. He was on a call. Something about quarterly projections. Jennifer finished her coffee, rinsed the mug, and headed back toward the guest room. I listened to her footsteps fade, then returned to my office, Paradise Cove Resort, August 21st through 28th. 7 nights, I pulled up satellite imagery. The property sat on the northwest coast of St. Thomas, tucked into its namesake cove. 25 rooms arranged in a horseshoe around a central pool, single road access. Nearest competitor marked 15 miles north. Boutique operation, independent ownership, recently listed due to I scrolled through the realtor's description. Owner's urgent financial situation. Motivated seller, my favorite words. I opened my locked drawer and extracted the files I'd need. LLC documentation for Wilson Holdings. 3 years of tax returns showing legitimate business income. Bank statements proving liquid assets. Evidence of capacity. Then I reached for my phone. Robert Wilson calling for account services. The banker picked up on the second ring. I'd been with this bank for 20 years. Moved enough money through their hands to warrant immediate attention. Mr. Wilson, how can I help? I paced to the window, watching Jennifer and Kevin load their cars outside. Workday routine. They had no idea. I need access to $1.9 million within 48 hours. Combination of liquid accounts and the credit line against the Tampa and Sarasota properties. Silence then. That's aggressive timing, Robert. May I ask? Investment opportunity. Time sensitive. Can you do it? I'll have preliminary approval by end of business today. Good. I'll wait for your call. I hung up before he could ask questions. Through the window, Jennifer's car pulled out of the driveway. Kevin's followed. 30 seconds later, the house settled into quiet. I spent the next 4 hours researching everything about Paradise Cove. Ownership history, revenue patterns, guest reviews, mostly positive, some complaints about data decor, and slow Wi-Fi. Staffing structure, lean operation, general manager named Amanda Parker, running day-to-day, owner increasingly absent. Current occupancy rate 62%. Plenty of room for improvement, but the bones were solid. The bones were perfect. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drafted my approach. I called David Richardson's office, got his secretary, scheduled an emergency consultation for 4 o'clock. Then I drove downtown 20 minutes through Orlando traffic, rehearsing my explanation with each stoplight. Keep emotion out. Present this as business with personal motivation, not revenge. Strategic acquisition. David's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower on Orange Avenue. He met me in the conference room, tie loosened, reading glasses perched on his head. Robert, your message said urgent. I spread documents across his polished table, the Paradise Cove listing, my financial statements, a handwritten timeline showing I needed ownership by August 20th. He studied them, expression shifting from curiosity to concern. You want to buy a hotel in the Virgin Islands in 72 hours? Yes. May I ask why the impossible timeline? My daughter is vacationing there August 21st. She doesn't know I'm buying the property. I need to own it before she arrives. David removed his glasses completely. Set them down with care. That's Robert. I understand there's personal motivation here, but acquiring commercial property in the Virgin Islands with 72 hours of due diligence is professionally inadvisable. The property is already listed. The owner is motivated. I have the capital. What's the actual legal risk? He sighed. The sound of a lawyer recognizing a client who won't be deterred. Title issues, undisclosed liens, structural problems. You're buying sight unseen. I'm buying strategically in this. He tapped my notes about the house. You want your Orlando property in an irrevocable trust? With me as sole trustee and beneficiary, no one can force a sale without my consent. You understand this means Jennifer can't inherit it in the standard way if something happens to you. I understand perfectly. David studied me across the table. Whatever he saw there, and I knew what he saw, the same cold clarity I'd felt since dawn, made him nod slowly. I'll need to bring in a Virgin Islands attorney, someone local who knows the territory. Do it. Bill me whatever it costs. Robert. He leaned forward. What did she do? I met his eyes. She needed a break from me. I'm giving her one. He didn't press further. Smart man. I left his office at 5:30, drove home through rush hour, called Michael Thompson from the car. Thompson Notary Services. Michael, it's Robert Wilson. I need trust documents prepared. My residential property transferred to a personal trust. How quickly can you draft them? Standard timeline is a week for review. I need them in 3 days. Silence stretched. Then that's possible. My expedited rate is whatever it is, fine. Send the paperwork tonight. I'll have it by email within 2 hours. Back home, the house felt different. I walked through rooms I'd lived in for 26 years, seeing them as Jennifer and Kevin saw them, dated, small, beneath their aspirations. The curtains Patricia had mocked. The dining room where I'd served pot roast while they poured my wine for everyone but me. This was still my home. They would never take it. My phone rang at 7. The banker. Mr. Wilson, your credit line is approved. 1.9 available Monday morning. Perfect. The purpose of loan is listed as commercial property acquisition. Is that correct? Yes. Very good. We'll have documents ready for signature. I made one more call that evening. Martin Reeves, Commercial Properties International, the listing agent for Paradise Cove. Mr. Reeves, my name is Robert Wilson. I'm interested in the Paradise Cove Resort property in St. Thomas. Is the owner accepting offers? His voice brightened immediately. Absolutely. When would you like to schedule a viewing? Tomorrow. I can be there by afternoon. That's very soon. You're flying in from Orlando. I'll book tonight. This is a serious inquiry, Mr. Reeves. I have proof of funds and can close within 48 hours. I'll contact Mr. Clark immediately. He'll be very pleased. Good. I'll call when I land. I hung up and opened my laptop to airline bookings. The screen showed flights to St. Thomas, departure times, prices. My finger hovered over the purchase button for American Airlines Flight 1847, departing 9:30 tomorrow morning. Across town, Jennifer and Kevin were probably having dinner somewhere nice, celebrating their upcoming vacation. Paradise Cove, their private week, their break from me. I clicked purchase. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Boarding pass attached. Departure 9:30 a.m. arrival 3:15 p.m. accounting for the time change. Plenty of daylight left to see the property. Meet the owner. Start negotiations. I forwarded the flight details to David Richardson with a simple message. I'll need that via attorney's contact info before I land. His reply came back within minutes. Already arranged. William Clark expects you at 4 p.m. tomorrow. His attorney will have preliminary documents ready. Robert, be careful. I closed the laptop and looked around my office. The hotel files, the trust documents Michael would send, the proof of funds letter from the bank, everything in order, everything aligned. In 3 days, my family would board a plane to Paradise, excited about their exclusive vacation, their break from the old man who embarrassed them with his dated curtains and worn jackets. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I allowed myself a brief nod, not a smile, nothing so obvious, and began packing my briefcase for tomorrow's flight. The flight landed in late afternoon heat, the kind that hits you like a wall when the cabin door opens. Cyril E. King Airport was smaller than I expected. Tourists everywhere in bright shirts and straw hats, families dragging roller bags toward rental car counters. I carried only my briefcase. This wasn't vacation. The taxi driver knew Paradise Cove without needing the address. Nice place, he said, pulling away from arrivals. You staying there? Business meeting? He nodded, navigating through Charlotte Mall's narrow streets, past cruise ship terminals and duty-free shops, then up into the hills. The road wound along the coast, occasional glimpses of turquoise water between palm trees and resort developments. 15 minutes later, we turned onto a private drive marked by a weather-worn sign. Paradise Cove Resort. The property was smaller than the photos suggested. A horseshoe of 2-story buildings painted pale yellow, arranged around a central pool that needed resurfacing. The lobby sat at the horseshoe's base, worn tile floor, ceiling fan clicking unevenly, furniture that had been expensive once but showed its age now. Beautiful bones beneath the neglect. A man waited in the lobby, late 50s. Shoulders slumped in a way that spoke of defeat before we even shook hands. Mr. Wilson. William Clark. His grip was weak. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for meeting me on short notice. When someone says they can close in 48 hours, I make time. He gestured toward the grounds. Would you like a tour? We walked the property slowly. William pointed out features, the renovated kitchenettes in each room, the private beach access down a stone stairway, the small restaurant that served breakfast included with roommate. His voice carried the tone of a man reciting facts he'd repeated too many times, hoping they'd sound better with repetition. I built this place 20 years ago, he said as we reached the pool. Poured everything into it. Market changed, big resorts moved in, and I understand business is timing. He looked at me with something like gratitude. You're not going to tear it down, turn it into condos. I'm keeping it as a hotel. I have plans for it. Relief washed across his face. We continued walking past rooms with ocean views, standard rooms facing the garden, the small gym with equipment that hadn't been updated this decade. Everything functional, nothing failing, just tired. A woman emerged from the office building, tablet in hand, professional despite the heat. Early 40s, dark hair pulled back, efficient movements. Mr. Clark, the Johnsons checked out early. They're requesting a partial refund for she stopped seeing me. Amanda, this is Robert Wilson, potential buyer. Amanda Parker, my general manager. She extended her hand without hesitation. Firm grip, direct eye contact. Will you be keeping the current staff? We're small but efficient. I'm evaluating everything. What's your role here? General manager. I handle daily operations, bookings, guest services. How long? 8 years. I nodded. 8 years meant she knew every system, every guest complaint, every vendor relationship. That knowledge had value. Good. I'll need that. We left her returning to her office and continued to William's space, a cramped room behind the front desk, paperwork stacked on every surface, computer showing an outdated reservation system. He gestured to a chair and I sat, briefcase across my lap. Your listing says 1.85, I said. I can close in 48 hours at 1.72. All cash. Minimal contingencies. William's fingers drummed the desk once. That's acceptable. When can we start paperwork? Today. Now. I opened my briefcase, pulled out the offer David's office had prepared. William read it slowly, lips moving slightly. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression. Hope maybe, or just exhaustion ending. You're serious? Completely. I slid my bank letter across his desk. Proof of funds, ability to close immediately. He read it twice, then set it down with the careful precision of someone handling something precious. I'll call my attorney. We can have preliminary documents by tonight. I'll be at the Marriott if you need me. I stood, extended my hand. We'll close this, William, by Friday. His handshake was firmer this time. I spent that evening with David's Virgin Islands contact, a sharp-eyed attorney named Sarah Chen, who walked me through title documents, inspection reports, and existing bookings with the speed of someone who'd done this too many times. She flagged minor issues, permits needing renewal, vendor contracts transferring with ownership, staff employment agreements. The property is sound, she concluded around midnight. Financially distressed, but structurally solid. If you're comfortable with the accelerated timeline, I see no reason not to proceed. Draw up closing documents. I want to sign Friday morning. She nodded, already making notes. By Thursday afternoon, we sat in William's office again. Him, me, Sarah, and William's attorney handling the final review. Numbers aligned, documents signed. I wired the deposit. $172,000, 10% down. William's hand trembled slightly when we shook on it. You're saving my life, he said quietly. I didn't respond. This wasn't about saving anyone. Friday morning, the final closing took 3 hours. Wire transfers, title transfers, keys exchanged, ownership documents filed with the Virgin Islands Recorder Office. By noon, Paradise Cove Resort belonged to Wilson Holdings LLC. I sat alone in what was now my office, reviewing the paperwork with the strange detachment of someone who just executed a plan that still felt surreal. Then I opened Amanda's reservation system, scrolling through August bookings there. August 21st through 28th. Morgan Party, 4 guests, Deluxe Ocean View Suite, prepaid deposit, balance due at checkout. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, then called Amanda to my office. She arrived within minutes. Professional weariness in her expression. New ownership meant uncertainty, and she was smart enough to be cautious. Amanda, thank you for coming. Please sit. She sat, tablet ready, prepared to take notes or defend her position. I wasn't sure which. I'm keeping you on as general manager. Your salary increases 15%. Effective immediately. Her eyes widened slightly. Thank you. You'll earn it. I have specific instructions regarding operations. First, I pulled out the handwritten list I'd prepared. These room reassignments and pricing adjustments take effect August 21st. She scanned the list, frown deepening. These are significant changes. Some guests have already confirmed reservations at current rates. Ownership changed. Terms changed. Virgin Islands booking law allows modifications with 72 hours notice. That's technically correct, but guests won't be happy. There's one reservation in particular. August 21st, Morgan Party for guests. She checked her tablet. Yes. Deluxe Ocean View. Week-long stay. Change it. Standard room. No ocean view. Apply new pricing structure. 40% increase across all services. Amanda looked up slowly, but they've already confirmed at the old rate. New ownership, new terms. They'll be notified Monday. That gives them 74 hours. She studied me for a long moment. This is personal. I held her gaze. This is business. Will you follow these instructions? Another pause. Then she nodded. Yes, sir. When they arrive and express surprise about the changes, you will inform them that I am the owner. Not before. Understood? Understood. Good. I'm flying back to Orlando tomorrow. You have my contact information for anything urgent. Otherwise, I trust your judgment on daily operations." She stood still holding the list, clearly processing what this meant. "May I ask the Morgan party? Who are they to you?" "Family," I said. "They wanted a break from me. I'm ensuring they get exactly what they asked for." Understanding dawned in her expression, followed by something that might have been sympathy or might have been respect. She didn't ask further questions. "I'll make the changes today. Thank you, Amanda." After she left, I sat in the quiet office reviewing staff files, vendor contracts, operational procedures. This wasn't just revenge theater. I bought a real business, and I intended to run it properly. The hotel would succeed. That was important, not for the money, but for the principle. I'd built something from nothing before. I could do it again. That evening, I stood on Paradise Cove's beach, feet in sand, still warm from the day's sun. The cove curved around me in both directions, private and pristine, waves lapped gently against the shore. 2 days from now, Jennifer and Kevin would stand in this exact spot, expecting their exclusive paradise vacation. They would find something very different waiting. I slipped the ownership deed into my briefcase and closed it with a quiet click. Tomorrow I'd fly home. I'd maintain normal behavior. I'd wave goodbye when they left for the airport on Sunday, wish them a wonderful trip, play the role of the excluded father accepting his fate. Monday morning, they'd receive Amanda's email about the ownership change and policy updates. By the time they understood what had happened, they'd be mid-flight, unable to cancel, and I would be home, sitting in my dated house with my old curtains, waiting for the phone call I knew would come. The sunset painted the cove in shades of orange and gold. Paradise indeed. I turned and walked back toward the hotel, my hotel, to pack for tomorrow's flight. I'd return to Orlando before dawn, my suitcase hidden in the back of my closet before the sun rose. The flight from Street and Thomas had landed just after midnight, and I'd taken a taxi home through empty streets, rehearsing normally with each passing mile. By morning, there was no evidence I'd ever left. Jennifer appeared in the kitchen around 9, already making lists on her phone. Vacation mode had settled over her. That distracted excitement I remembered from when she was younger, planning trips with Margaret. Different now, though. This time, I wasn't invited. "Dad, have you seen my blue beach bag?" I appeared from the hallway with it. "Hall closet. I cleaned it after last summer." She took it without meeting my eyes. "Oh, thanks." I'd made coffee, set out her preferred creamer. Small gestures that cost nothing. Meant everything once. Now they barely registered. "Weather looks perfect," I said, pulling up the forecast on my tablet. Low 8s, sunny all week. "Great." I helped her pack through the morning, finding her favorite swimsuit, checking that her phone charger would work with Virgin Islands outlets, folding clothes the way Margaret had taught me 40 years ago. Each movement was methodical, familiar, bitter. I placed the swimsuit in her luggage with the same care I'd used later to dismantle her expectations. Kevin arrived around noon, hauling their shared luggage like he owned the place. He surveyed my assistance with a smirk. "Playing bellhop now, Robert." I continued folding a beach towel, just helping Jennifer. He dropped into my recliner, the one Patricia had judged during dinner, and checked his phone. "Travel is expensive. We're already stretched thin with this trip," the opening I'd anticipated. I pulled 5 $100 bills from my wallet, counted them deliberately, and held them toward Jennifer. "Here, 500. Pocket money." She took them without thanks, stuffing them in her purse. Kevin watched the exchange, then muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "At least the old man's good for something." I smiled faintly, said nothing. They left around 2 to handle last-minute errands. I continued my performance, washing lunch dishes, straightening the living room, acting like a man resigned to a quiet weekend alone. Through the window, I watched Kevin's car disappear down the street. Then I went to my closet and pulled out the overnight bag I'd packed that morning. Jennifer called around 6 o'clock from Dennis and Patricia's house where they'd gather before tomorrow's early departure. "Dad, we're leaving at 10 tomorrow morning. Just wanted to let you know. Have a wonderful time." A pause, almost guilty. "We'll send photos." "I'd like that." After hanging up, I picked up my bag. My expression hardened. By 7 o'clock, the street was quiet. I carried my bag to the corner, 3 houses down, where I'd arranged for a different taxi service to pick me up. No chance of Jennifer or Kevin driving past, seeing me leave. I was covering tracks they didn't know existed. The evening flight to St. Thomas departed at 8:15. I sat in coach, briefcase on my lap, going over final details. Amanda's protocols, staff assignments, the precise moment of revelation. This was theater, and I was directing every scene. We landed at 11 o'clock. The humid night air hit me as I descended the stairs to the tarmac. That tropical weight fragrant with salt and vegetation. A taxi carried me back to Paradise Cove through darkness, past shuttered shops and sleeping resort towns, my hotel, my property, my stage. I slept 4 hours in a small staff apartment Amanda had prepared, then rose at 6. While I showered in St. Thomas. Jennifer was probably waking in Orlando, checking her flight details one more time. While I dressed in business slacks and a pressed blue shirt, Kevin was likely making coffee in Dennis and Patricia's kitchen, eager to start their exclusive vacation. While I reviewed staff assignments in my office, they were loading luggage into Dennis's SUV. 2 stages, 2 performances about to collide. At 8, I gathered the staff in Paradise Cove's small conference room. Amanda sat at the front, tablet ready. Marcus, our security coordinator, leaned against the wall. 2 housekeepers, the restaurant manager, the front desk clerk, everyone who'd interact with the Morgan party. I distributed printed instruction sheets, professionally formatted, leaving nothing to interpretation. The Morgan party checks in at 3:00 p.m., I said. Party of 4. They're currently assigned to rooms 12 and 14. Amanda confirmed on her tablet. Standard rooms, not the deluxe ocean view suite they originally booked. Correct. I made eye contact with each staff member. They will complain. You will explain the room reassignment was necessary due to ownership transition. You will be professional and firm. The younger housekeeper raised her hand. Is there a problem with these guests? Just follow the protocols exactly. After the meeting dispersed, Amanda lingered. You're really doing this? Every word of those protocols exactly as written. She studied me for a long moment. And when they see you, I checked my watch. 11 a.m. local time. The Morgan family was boarding their flight in Orlando right now. Dennis probably telling nearby passengers about their exclusive boutique resort. Patricia showing photos on her phone. They were walking down the jetway into a plane that would bring them here to me completely unaware. They'll see the owner of this property, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. Amanda nodded slowly. She'd chosen her side. I spent the next hours inspecting preparations. Walked through rooms 12 and 14. Standard accommodations with parking lot views. Tested the water pressure. Functional but weak. Nothing like the rainfall shower in the deluxe suite they'd expected. Checked the air conditioning. Worked but noisy. Humming loudly enough to interfere with sleep. Everything was adequate. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was right. At 2, I changed into my business attire. Checked my reflection in the office mirror. Composed, professional, the owner of a Caribbean resort conducting normal operations. No hint of the father they'd excluded, mocked, planned to manipulate. At 2:30, I reviewed Amanda's screen one final time. Flight 1847 from Orlando landed on schedule. They'd be collecting luggage now, finding a taxi heading this way. At 2:47, I heard gravel crunch in the driveway. I straightened my collar and walked toward the lobby. Through the window, I could see a taxi pulling into the circular drive, doors opening, familiar figures emerging into afternoon sunlight. Jennifer stepped out first, shading her eyes. Kevin followed, already surveying the property with proprietary assessment. Dennis and Patricia emerged from the other side. Patricia immediately photographing the entrance. They had no idea what waited inside. I stepped back from the window, positioned myself in the office hallway where I could observe the reception desk. Amanda moved to her station. Marcus took his customary position near the entrance, and I checked my watch one final time. 3 o'clock. The front doors opened, and my family walked into my hotel. The lobby air conditioning met them with a gentle rush. I watched from the hallway as they took in the space, smaller than they'd expected, probably, but beautiful in its tropical simplicity. Ceiling fans turned lazily overhead. Potted palms flanked the reception desk. Through the far windows, the pool glittered turquoise against ocean blue. Kevin approached the desk first, assertive confidence in every step. He slapped his credit card on the polished wood. Morgan, party of 4. We have the deluxe ocean view suite reserved. Amanda took the card with professional courtesy, began typing. Her screen showed the reassignments I'd implemented. She paused exactly as we'd rehearsed. Yes, Mr. Morgan. I have your reservation. There's been a slight adjustment due to ownership transition. Adjustment? Kevin interrupted. We booked months ago. If you'll just wait in the lobby area, I'll have everything ready shortly. She gestured toward the seating area. Wicker furniture with tropical cushions. A coffee table displaying resort brochures. Kevin sighed with exaggerated patience and turned away. Jennifer settled onto the sofa, pulling out her phone. Dennis and Patricia remained standing, photographing the decor. Patricia touching a potted orchid to see if it was real. I stepped from the hallway, tablet in hand, accompanied by Marcus, who'd been briefed to follow my lead. I walked with the measured authority of someone reviewing daily operations, checking my screen, seemingly absorbed in resort business, professional, unhurried, in control. I was 10 feet from them when Jennifer glanced up. Her face went through a rapid sequence. Casual attention, recognition, confusion. Her mouth opened slightly. "Dad." The word hung in the air. Kevin's head snapped around. Dennis and Patricia froze mid-photograph. I looked up as if just noticing them showed no surprise whatsoever. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Jennifer's voice carried genuine bewilderment. Kevin Unk's confusion shifted to anger in an instant. "Are you serious? You followed us." I met his gaze evenly. "I work here." That stopped him. His expression cycled through incomprehension, then settled into contempt. He laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound that echoed off the tile. "You work here? What? You got a job at our resort to spy on us?" Dennis moved closer to Patricia, whispering too loudly. "This is inappropriate. Completely inappropriate. This is harassment," Kevin said, voice rising, taking an aggressive step forward. "I want you out of here now." Other guests in the lobby turned to watch. A couple at the opposite sofa exchanged glances. An elderly man reading a newspaper lowered it slowly. I didn't move. "I'm conducting business. Your business is ruining our vacation. Get out." Jennifer stood, trying to insert herself between us. "Kevin, maybe we should know." He cut her off, then turned to Amanda. "Get your manager. Get security. I want this man removed from the property." Amanda signaled Marcus, who moved smoothly forward, not threatening, just present. Professional hospitality industry de-escalation, positioning himself, creating space, radiating calm authority. "Sir, please lower your voice," Amanda said. "You're disturbing other guests." Kevin's face wrinkled. "I'm disturbing. He's the one stalking his own daughter." Marcus stepped closer, voice quiet but firm. "Gentlemen, let's keep things calm." Kevin rounded on him. "Tell this man he needs to leave. We're paying guests." Amanda stood, drawing every eye in the lobby. When she spoke, her voice carried perfect clarity, each word distinct. "Mr. Wilson is the owner of Paradise Cove Resort. As of August 19th, you are his guests." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ceiling fan seemed to quiet. The couple on the sofa stared openly now. The elderly man had abandoned all pretense of reading. Kevin Unk's mouth worked soundlessly. "Owner?" Jennifer looked at me, color draining from her face. You bought this hotel?" I met her eyes. "I did." Patricia's phone clattered to the tile floor. Dennis grabbed his wife's arm, steadying them both. Kevin recovered first, aggression surging back. "This is insane. You can't." "I can," I said, cutting him off with the same calm I'd maintained throughout. "I did. Now, Miss Parker will finish your check-in. Your rooms are ready." Kevin Unk's fist clenched at his sides. His breathing had quickened, face still flushed. "This is we booked in good faith. This is our vacation. You can't just your reservation stands," Amanda interjected smoothly. "Paradise Cove Resort honors all existing bookings. There have been some adjustments due to the ownership transition, which is standard practice. If you'd like to review, I don't want to review anything with him here." Kevin Unk's voice had dropped to something dangerous. "This is a setup. This whole thing is a setup." For the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. "This is a hotel. You made a reservation. You're checking in. Everything is entirely standard." Jennifer sank back onto the sofa, still staring at me like I was someone she'd never met, which I suppose was accurate. "How long have you?" She couldn't finish the question. "I closed the purchase on Friday." "That's 2 days ago," Dennis said faintly. "We booked 3 months ago." "Ownership changes happened," I said. "The property was listed. I made an offer." "Business." Kevin turned to Amanda, ignoring me completely. "Fine, we'll check in and then we'll be filing the complaint with the tourism board with consumer protection." "This is fraud." "You're welcome to file whatever complaints you wish," Amanda replied. "Your confirmation number is in our system. Everything is documented. Shall I continue with check-in?" She slid the registration form across the desk. Kevin snatched a pen and signed with violent strokes. Jennifer sat motionless, phone forgotten in her lap. Patricia had retrieved her phone from the floor, but seemed uncertain what to do with it. Dennis kept glancing between me and Kevin, calculating something. Amanda typed efficiently, then reached beneath the desk for key cards. She set 2 on the counter. "You're in rooms 12 and 14, second floor." The porter will help with your bags. Wait. Kevin Unk's eyes narrowed. 12 and 14. We booked the deluxe ocean view suite. Due to ownership transition and property updates, some reassignments were necessary. You were notified via email 72 hours prior to check-in. We received no email. Amanda turned her monitor to show him. Sent Monday morning at 9 a.m. to the email address on file. morgan@outlook.com. Kevin pulled out his phone, scrolled violently through his inbox. His face changed as he found it. He read, his jaw tightening with each line. This says the rates increased 40% across all services. That's correct. New ownership implemented updated pricing again. You were notified within the legal window for modification. This is, he looked at me, understanding finally dawning in full. You did this deliberately. I said nothing. Didn't need to. Jennifer stood slowly, moving to the desk, taking one of the key cards with a hand that visibly trembled. She still hadn't looked at me again. Couldn't maybe. Your rooms are on the second floor, Amanda repeated. Breakfast is included. Served 6 o'clock to 10 a.m. in the restaurant. Checkout is 11 a.m. on the 28th. Do you have any other questions? Kevin opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No, he finally said, wonderful. Enjoy your stay at Paradise Cove Resort. The porter approached with their luggage cart. Jennifer followed him toward the stairs like someone in a dream. Patricia held Dennis's arm as they trailed behind. Kevin remained at the desk a moment longer, staring at me with undisguised hatred. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But not today. He grabbed the second key card and followed his family toward the stairs. I watched them climb, Jennifer's shoulders rigid, Kevin's posture radiating fury, Dennis and Patricia whispering urgently between themselves. Marcus moved to stand beside me. That went exactly like you planned, he observed. It did. What happens when they see the rooms? I checked my watch. In approximately 3 minutes, they'll discover that standard rooms have parking lot views, lower water pressure, and older air conditioning units. They'll realize the mini bar prices have doubled. They'll notice the bathroom amenities are basic rather than premium. And then they'll come back down here to complain. I straighten my tablet and Miss Parker will politely explain that everything meets the stated accommodation standards and no refunds are available for bookings made under previous ownership. Through the second floor windows, I could see movement in room 12. A door opening, Jennifer stepping inside, Kevin behind her, stopping abruptly in the doorway. I heard the muffled sound of raised voices. Amanda caught my eye from behind the desk. I nodded once. The show had just begun. The porter left us in the hallway. Jennifer slid her key card into room 12's lock, the green light blinking permission. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, then stopped. I watched from the lobby's security camera feed in my office. Amanda had positioned the monitor where I could observe without being obvious. Jennifer stood motionless in the doorway, taking in the standard room with its parking lot view, the dated furniture, the narrow bathroom visible through the half-open door. This wasn't the Ducks Ocean View suite shown in their booking photos. She walked to the window like someone underwater, movement slow and dreamlike, pulled the curtain aside, stared at the parking lot, the dumpster enclosure, a maintenance shed with peeling paint. Kevin pushed past her into room 14. His parents assigned space, already complaining. I couldn't hear the words through the camera, but his gestures were clear enough, arms spread wide, pointing at the window. Dennis appeared behind him, face sagging with comprehension. Patricia sank onto the bed, still clutching her purse. Within 10 minutes, my desk phone rang. Amanda's voice professional. Ms. Morgan online, too, regarding her room assignment. I listened to the recorded call later. Jennifer's voice tight with restrained anger. We booked a deluxe ocean view suite. This is a standard room with a parking lot view. Amanda's response exactly as scripted. I apologize for the confusion, Miss Morgan. During the ownership transition, we had to reassign several reservations due to renovation scheduling. Your rate remains the same. Can we upgrade? Pay the difference? I'm afraid the Ducks rooms are fully booked through your checkout date. Jennifer hung up without responding. That evening, they attempted dinner at our restaurant, the only dining option within walking distance. I positioned myself at a corner table with paperwork spread before me, reviewing actual operational reports while remaining visible, professional, untouchable, the owner conducting business. When their menus arrived, Kevin's expression shifted. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through screenshots he'd saved of our old pricing. His jaw tightened. The server approached his summons with practiced patience. These prices don't match your website. New management implemented updated pricing yesterday, sir. All platforms were updated simultaneously. Kevin looked across the restaurant at me. I didn't acknowledge his gaze, just signed the document Amanda had brought for approval. He approached my table a moment later, Dennis trailing reluctantly behind. I looked up with mild attention. The prices on this menu don't match what's on your website. New management, new pricing. Updated yesterday across all platforms. That's convenient timing. That's business, Kevin. If the rates don't suit you, I'm sure other properties would welcome your reservation. His face colored. The nearest hotel is 15 miles away. I returned to my paperwork. Then I suppose our rates are competitive. He stood there another moment, breathing through his nose before returning to his table. Their simple dinner, nothing extravagant, just entree and drinks, cost them $180 before tip. I watched Patricia's face when the bill arrived. She looked like she'd bitten something sour. The next morning brought new complications. At precisely 6 a.m., maintenance began work on the hot water system. The pipes ran through the walls adjacent to rooms 12 and 14. The sound was impressive, hammering, clanging, water rushing through old plumbing. Perfectly legal, perfectly timed. I conducted my morning property walkthrough at 6:15, clipboard in hand, happening to pass their rooms just as Dennis emerged in his bathrobe, hair standing at angles, looking haggarded. Morning. Sorry for the noise. Necessary repairs should wrap up by 7 o'clock. He blinked at me, too tired to form a response. I continued my inspection, noting items on my clipboard that had nothing to do with him. By the third day, the pattern was undeniable. Wi-Fi became unstable. Functional in the lobby and restaurant, mysteriously dropping in their specific rooms. Our technician shrugged apologetically. Island infrastructure. Sometimes signals don't reach certain areas. Room service orders were delayed. Not excessively, nothing actionable, but 60 to 90 minutes instead of the promised 30 to 45. Kitchen backup during peak hours happens sometimes. Pool hours were adjusted for cleaning. The announcement went to all guests. Routine maintenance 2 to 4 p.m. daily. Prime afternoon hours. Dennis and Patricia had planned to spend those hours poolside. Each incident alone was minor. Together they were suffocating. Kevin documented everything. I saw him through the window photographing his parking lot view, timing his room service order with his phone stopwatch, recording the Wi-Fi disconnection. He was building a case, collecting evidence. For what exactly, I wasn't sure, but it didn't concern me. Everything I'd implemented fell within acceptable hotel operations. Maintenance happened. Wi-Fi had outages. Kitchens experienced delays. There was no violation of any standard or law, just consistent inconvenience. On August 23rd, Kevin confronted me near reception. Laptop open, showing documentation. The Wi-Fi in our rooms doesn't work. I glanced at his screen. Amanda mentioned connectivity issues. We've contacted the service provider. When will it be fixed? I checked my watch. They indicated 24 to 48 hours for technician availability. The business center and lobby have stable connections if you need internet access. This is ridiculous. This is island infrastructure. I don't control the telecommunications provider's schedule. He slammed his laptop closed and walked away. By August 24th evening, the family was fragmenting. I observed from my office window as Jennifer sat alone by the pool. During the brief hours, it remained open. Kevin paced nearby, phone pressed to his ear, probably researching alternatives, finding none in their price range. Dennis and Patricia huddled under an umbrella, whispering with tight urgency, occasionally glancing toward Jennifer with expressions that weren't sympathetic. They were blaming each other, assigning fault. The pressure was working exactly as designed. That night, I saw lights burning late in room 14. Dennis and Patricia were awake, proudly discussing their options, finding none acceptable. In room 12, Jennifer's silhouette moved past the window repeatedly, pacing, unable to settle. Kevin's light stayed on past midnight. Through the thin walls, maintenance staff reported hearing keyboard clicks, rapid, aggressive typing. I made a note on my tablet. Monitoring required, then returned to actual operational business. Vendor contracts that needed review. A staffing issue. Amanda had flagged quarterly projections for my other properties. Paradise Cove was a real hotel. I was running it properly. Improving systems, addressing genuine maintenance needs that the Morgan family happened to be experiencing. The transitional growing pains of new ownership was simply unfortunate timing or perfect timing depending on perspective. The next morning, Amanda called my cell at 8. "Sir, you should know the family posted several negative reviews overnight." I wasn't surprised. "How bad?" 1 star across 3 platforms. Language is aggressive. Accusations of discrimination and harassment. Are any allegations factually accurate? No. Everything we did was within policy and law. Draft professional responses. Acknowledge dissatisfaction. Reference ownership transition. Offer general commitment to service improvement. Don't engage with specific accusations. Already started. I'll send them for your approval. I pulled up the reviews on my laptop. Dennis and Patricia's was venomous. Owner engages in targeted harassment. After discovering personal connection, systematically degraded our experience. Unethical business practices. Discriminatory treatment. Avoid at all costs. Kevin's used legal-sounding language. Breach of contract regarding room assignments. Unauthorized price increases. Owner has clear conflict of interest. Consumer rights violations. Will be pursuing legal recourse. I read them twice, analytical rather than emotional. They were angry, desperate, grasping for weapons they didn't have. My responses, drafted carefully and reviewed by Amanda, went live by noon. We regret this guest's dissatisfaction. Ownership transitions occasionally require operational adjustments as we work to improve service standards. We appreciate all feedback and remain committed to providing quality hospitality, professional, unassailable, untouchable. In room 14, I imagined Kevin refreshing the review sites, seeing my response, realizing it gave him nothing to attack. 3 more days until checkout. 3 more days until they'd face the bill, calculated at new rates, including all service charges, resort fees, and incidentals. 3 more days until they'd return to Orlando and discover what I'd done with the house. I smiled briefly, alone in my office, then returned to work. Kevin's response appeared online at 7 the next morning, detailed, methodical, citing specific statutes he'd researched about consumer protection in the Virgin Islands. He'd spent hours on it. I could tell from the precise timestamps, the legal citations, the desperate professionalism of someone grasping for leverage. It was impressive. It was also useless. By 9 a.m., he was sitting in a local attorney's office. I learned this later from Amanda, who heard it from our restaurant server, who'd overheard Kevin making the appointment by phone. Small island, small resort, information traveled. The consultation cost him $350. I knew because he complained about it loudly to Jennifer in the hallway afterward, voice carrying through their open door. The attorney had found nothing actionable. Price changes were legally implemented with required notice. Room reassignments during ownership transitions were within hotel rights. Maintenance was routine. Wi-Fi failures were infrastructure issues, not intentional service denial. He said, "We can leave negative reviews or find alternative accommodation," Kevin told Jennifer, voice tight with barely contained fury. "That's it. That's our legal recourse." Jennifer's response was too quiet to hear, but Kevin's follow-up wasn't. $350 to be told we're screwed. An hour later, my phone rang. Jennifer's name on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, Jennifer." Breathing, ragged, unsteady. Then, "How could you do this to us?" Her voice was breaking. She'd been crying. I could hear it in the thickness of her words, the way they came in gasps. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" I kept my tone measured, calm. "I'm conducting business. You wanted a vacation without me. You have one. You're punishing us. This is cruel. This is what you chose. I'm simply providing the service you're paying for. When we get back," her voice rose to something near hysteria. "When we get back, we're evicting you from our house. We'll sell it whether you like it or not." Ice crystallized in my chest. This was the moment I'd anticipated, prepared for. "Try it." 2 words delivered flat. "Final." She sobbed once, loud and harsh. Then the line went dead. I sat in my Paradise Cove office, phone still in hand, and considered the conversation. Jennifer was unraveling. Good. Kevin was desperate, throwing money at attorneys who couldn't help him. Better. Dennis and Patricia were humiliated. Their bragging to neighbors now a source of mortification. Perfect. But the house threat required immediate attention. I booked an afternoon flight to Orlando. Michael Thompson's office was exactly as I remembered, modest, professional, paperwork organized in precise stacks. He had the trust documents ready, printed and tabbed with colored flags marking where I needed to sign. "This makes the property untouchable without your explicit authorization," he explained, sliding the first page across his desk. "Your daughter cannot force sale, cannot claim inheritance rights while you're living, cannot even contest the arrangement without significant legal expense." "That's exactly what I need," he studied me briefly. "May I ask what prompted this level of protection?" "Family complications." Michael nodded wisely, asking nothing further. "Sign here, here, and initial the final page." I worked through the documents methodically. Each signature, each initial, another lock on something Jennifer thought she could take from me. When Margaret and I bought this house in 1999, Jennifer was 11 years old, running through the empty rooms before we'd even moved furniture in. She'd claimed the bedroom with a window seat, made us promise it would always be hers. I'd kept that promise for 26 years. Now she wanted to sell it to pay off credit cards. Speaking of which, at Michael's desk, I pulled up my credit monitoring service on my phone. I'd co-signed on 2 of Jennifer's cards years ago when she was establishing credit. The linked accounts showed in my report $48,000 in debt. I scrolled through the details. Multiple credit cards, all opened or significantly increased within the last 6 months. A personal loan from a predatory lender at 18% interest. Cash advances, balance transfers, the pattern of people juggling, desperate, counting on money they didn't have yet, counting on my house. I took a screenshot, then another of the timeline. The debt accumulation had accelerated in June, around the time Kevin had announced the vacation, around the time they'd started planning to pressure me into selling. They'd spent money they expected to get from my equity. Everything looks in order, Michael said, applying his notary seal to the final page. I'll file these with the county recorder this afternoon. You'll have complete protection. I slid 1 copy into my briefcase, left another with Michael, and carried the third to my car. The flight back to St. Thomas didn't leave until the next morning, so I spent the night in my own home, my legally protected, completely controlled home. I walked through the rooms Jennifer wanted to sell, touching the walls Margaret had helped paint, standing in the kitchen where we'd made breakfast for 30 years. Jennifer could threaten all she wanted. This house was mine. I returned to Paradise Cove on the morning of August 26th. Amanda met me in the office with updates. The Morgan family was subdued, spending minimal time in their rooms, avoiding the restaurant where prices hurt too much. They discovered a food truck 3 miles down the road and were walking there for cheaper meals. The heat is getting to them, Amanda reported. Mrs. Morgan, the older one, looked sunburned and exhausted yesterday. And the reviews, your responses are posted. Professional, brief. We've had 3 new bookings since yesterday. Guess who read the reviews and our responses and appreciated our transparency about the transition period? Good. The negative reviews were actually helping. People understood that ownership changes created temporary disruption. My measured responses demonstrated professionalism. Kevin's attacks were backfiring. I pulled up the reviews again, reading them with fresh perspective. All that rage, all those accusations, all that desperate legal language, it made him look unreasonable, especially against my calm acknowledgement of temporary difficulties. One more thing, Amanda said. Mr. Morgan asked about early checkout. He wanted to know if leaving a day early would reduce their bill. I looked up. What did you tell him? That our cancellation policy requires full payment for reserve dates regardless of early departure. He'd still owe for 7 nights. Good. She hesitated. He asked what the final bill would total. I calculated it for him. With the updated rates, all meals and services, resort fees, incidentals. It's approximately $4,200. More than double what they'd budgeted for, I imagined. More than they'd expected when Kevin had smugly poured my wine at my dining table. When Jennifer had said they needed a break from me. When he heard the amount, Amanda continued, he went pale. Said, there must be an error. Is there? No. Everything is accurate according to current pricing and their usage. Then there's no error. I spent the rest of August 26th reviewing actual business operations. Paradise Cove had guests besides the Morgans, after all, and they deserve proper service. I approved Amanda's staffing schedule, reviewed the quarterly maintenance budget, and met with our food vendor about supply chain improvements. By evening, I was genuinely tired from legitimate work. Through my office window, I saw the Morgan family sitting separately around the pool, not together, separately. Jennifer on one lounge chair, Kevin on another 10 feet away, Dennis and Patricia at a table, Dennis reading something on his tablet, Patricia staring at nothing. They'd stopped talking to each other. The vacation they'd been so excited about, the exclusive boutique resort experience they'd bragged about to neighbors had become a prison sentence they were enduring in isolated silence. One more day until checkout. One more day until they'd face that $4,200 bill. One more day until they'd return to Orlando and discover the house was beyond their reach. I opened my briefcase, pulled out the trust document copy, and read through it one final time. Every clause, every protection, every guarantee of my absolute control. The house was mine alone. And from Amanda's report, they had no idea what waited for them at checkout. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Not joy, not cruelty, just the cold satisfaction of pieces falling into place exactly as designed. Then returned the document to my briefcase and locked it. Tomorrow would bring the final moves. Tonight I'd let them sit with their expensive mediocrity, their shattered vacation dreams, their fragmenting family unity. Tonight, I'd let them wonder what else I'd planned. They'd find out soon enough. I spent August 26th reviewing final details with Amanda. The Morgan family, she reported, had requested early checkout, departing the 27th instead of the 28th. Trying to escape a day early, as if leaving sooner would somehow erase what had happened. They seem eager to get home, Amanda said diplomatically. I imagine they are. She pulled up their account on her screen. The final bill is ready for review. I studied the itemization, room charges at current rates, restaurant meals, room service orders, resort fees, incidentals, every charge legitimate, every price legally posted, the mathematics of consequence calculated down to the last dollar. Process it exactly as shown, I said. No adjustments. Morning of the 27th, I watched from my office window as they carried luggage to the reception area. Dennis moved slowly, looking older than he had a week ago. Patricia kept her sunglasses on despite being indoors. Kevin's posture was rigid, controlled fury in every movement. Jennifer walked last, shoulders curved inward, diminished. Amanda greeted them with professional courtesy. Good morning. Checking out. Kevin placed his key cards on the counter with precision. Yes. Early departure. Of course. Amanda's fingers moved across the keyboard. The printer hummed to life, producing the final bill. She placed it face down on the counter, slid it toward Kevin with practiced grace. He picked it up confidently, flipped it over. His hand froze midair. I couldn't hear his exact words from my office, but I saw his mouth form them. This says $4,200. Amanda's response was calm, rehearsed. She gestured to the itemized breakdown, explained each section. Updated rates, dining expenses, resort fees, all documented, all legal. Kevin's voice rose. Other guests in the lobby glanced over. Amanda maintained her professional composure, referencing terms and conditions, ownership transition clauses, email notifications sent August 19th. Kevin pulled out his credit card, tapped it against the terminal, declined. He tried again, entering the PIN manually this time. Declined. He yanked out a different card. The terminal beeped rejection. His face was white now, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He turned to Dennis. I couldn't hear the exchange, but Dennis shook his head slowly, looking at the floor. Patricia pulled her purse closer to her body, protective. Jennifer stepped forward. She didn't speak, didn't meet Kevin's eyes, just handed Amanda her credit card and stared at the wall while the transaction processed. Approved. She took the receipt, folded it without looking, and put it in her purse. The family moved toward the exit like people leaving a hospital after bad news. Slow, silent, defeated. I didn't watch them drive away. They were no longer my concern. Amanda came to my office an hour later. They're gone. Thank you for handling that professionally. It was difficult to watch, she paused, even knowing the context. Consequences are always difficult. That's what makes them effective. I flew back to Orlando that afternoon. While they traveled in heavy silence, I could imagine it. The four of them unable to look at each other. Kevin staring out the airplane window. Jennifer with her eyes closed. Dennis and Patricia sitting in a different row. I reviewed Amanda's operational reports for the week. Paradise Cove had functioned well. Other guests had left positive reviews. The Morgan family's negative reviews had actually increased bookings. People appreciated my transparent, professional responses. The business was solid. The revenge was complete. I'd timed everything precisely. While they were in S. Thomas, David Richardson had delivered the trust documents to my house. Left in a legal envelope on the kitchen table where they couldn't miss it. They'd arrive home exhausted. Financially devastated, emotionally fractured, and they'd find that envelope waiting. I landed in Orlando that evening, but didn't go home. Stayed at one of my hotels instead. The boutique property in Winter Park, nice, but not ostentatious. I wanted them to discover the documents without me there. Wanted them to read the rental terms, the trust structure, the reality that the house they'd planned to sell was completely beyond their reach. The next morning, August 28th, I returned to my house. The kitchen showed evidence of Kevin's rage. Mail scattered on the floor, a decorative bowl broken, a dent in the wall near the counter. The legal envelope lay torn open. Documents strewn across the table. They'd been here. They'd discovered the truth, and they'd left. I cleaned up the broken bowl, stacked the mail, left the dent in the wall. Evidence was useful sometimes. My phone rang that evening. Dennis, Robert. His voice was careful, measured. I wanted to apologize for the condition we left your kitchen in. Kevin was upset. I noticed Patricia and I had no idea about the house situation. If we'd known you'd have what? Not taken the vacation you bragged about to your neighbors. Silence, then quietly. The Hendersons asked how the exclusive resort was. They'd seen the reviews online. Someone posted photos. I'm sure that was awkward. Patricia is mortified. We told everyone this would be a luxury vacation. It was a vacation at a resort. The luxury was your assumption. He exhaled slowly. Kevin and Jennifer are staying with us temporarily, just until they figure things out. That's generous of you. Not really. We can barely afford it. The lawyer consultation, the meal expenses, changing our flights were tapped out, too. I said nothing. What was there to say? They'd aligned themselves with Kevin and Jennifer's plans. They'd participated in my exclusion. Enjoyed the idea of a vacation I wasn't worthy to attend. Now they were experiencing the aftermath. Robert, is there any way no? You don't know what I was going to ask. Yes, I do. And the answer is no. You made choices. These are the consequences. He hung up without goodbye. 3 hours later, Jennifer called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Broken. Sobbing, barely coherent. Something about $1,800 a month. Something about debt. Something about Kevin blaming her for not controlling me. I listened to it once, then deleted it. This was exactly what needed to happen. They needed to sit with what they'd done. Understand the full weight of their choices. Jennifer's tears weren't repentance yet. They were self-pity. She was crying because of consequences, not because she genuinely understood her failures. That night, alone in my house with its dated curtains and worn furniture, I walked through rooms that had raised Jennifer from childhood to adulthood. Her bedroom still had the window seat where she'd read for hours. The kitchen still had the step stool I'd built so she could help Margaret cook. This house was filled with memories of a daughter I'd loved unconditionally. That daughter had disappeared somewhere along the way. Maybe she could come back. Maybe not. But I'd done what I needed to do, shown her that respect matters, that people aren't resources, that fathers, even ones with modest houses and old jackets, have dignity that shouldn't be casually trampled. Whether she learned from this was up to her now. I'd taught the lesson. The rest was hers to figure out. 2 days passed before she knocked on my door. I opened it to find Jennifer diminished. No makeup, simple clothes, exhausted beyond words. Dad, can we talk? I stepped aside. She sat on the sofa's edge, hands folded. I was a terrible daughter. You were always there, and I treated you like you were invisible. I'm so sorry. I kept my expression neutral. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it to show you what respect looks like. She nodded, tears falling. I didn't comfort her. She needed to sit with this. She returned September 2nd. Kaller and I are divorcing. He blamed me for not controlling you. She showed me divorce papers, credit counselor appointments, job applications. I'm taking responsibility. I wrote 2 options on paper. 1, you and Kevin pay what you owe. Then we're done. 2, you stay alone, pay rent, rebuild independently. Maybe we repair things. She pointed to option 2 without hesitation. No money from me, no shortcuts. I'm certain. September 5th, she brought cheap sandwiches. We ate on the terrace. I showed her my hotel portfolio, 4 properties, millions in assets. This was always you? Her voice broke. I didn't want money to change you, but I changed anyway. I became someone who saw you as a resource, not a father. We sat as evening settled. Not forgiveness yet. That required time, but not war anymore either. Same time next week? She asked. Same time after she left, I stayed on the terrace, thinking about what I'd built. Not the modest existence they'd assumed, but the successful life I'd been living all along. They'd never bothered to see it. Now Jennifer was beginning to. I'd set boundaries, demanded respect, shown her that consequences weren't cruelty, they were clarity. This was never about destroying her. It was about restoring my own dignity, teaching her that people deserve basic consideration, that respect isn't automatic, especially not from family. Jennifer knocked again the following week and the week after. Each visit she was more grounded. I remained guarded, offered no financial help, but I showed up. Because revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about restoring your own dignity, showing consequences, and then, if they prove worthy, offering the possibility of redemption. Jennifer was working for hers. Whether she'd earn it remained to be seen, but she was trying, and I was willing to let her try. That was enough for now.
And that concludes this story. That was a pretty wild one if you ask me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Now, let's get right into the next story. It's titled,
At my wife's family house party, my wife's sister cracked a joke. If your wife cheats on you with her true love, her high school lover, will you whimper? Everyone laughed except me. He's impotent in bed anyway. My wife smirked. I just raised my hot dog and said message received. I moved out that night, cut contact, and vanished. A year later my name is Jack Carter, and at 29 years old, I thought I had this whole marriage thing figured out. See, for 8 long years, I bought into this romantic that marriage was like cement. You know, mix all the right ingredients together, give it time to cure, and boom, you've got something unbreakable that'll last forever. What a load of crap that turned out to be. But hey, hindsight's 20/20, right? Clara and I had been through the ringer more times than I could count. We'd scraped through those brutal early years when we were broker than a joke. Living off instant ramen like it was some kind of gourmet cuisine. I'm talking the cheap stuff, too. None of that fancy cup noodles nonsense. We'd stretch a pack of top ramen into 2 meals if we had to, adding whatever sad vegetables we could afford from the discount bin at the grocery store. Our first apartment was a shoe box with paper-thin walls where we could hear our neighbors' entire life stories whether we wanted to or not. We slept on this mattress that was thinner than a pancake. Probably picked up from some sketchy thrift store that smelled like mothballs and broken dreams. But here's the thing that really gets me now. I thought we were a team back then. I mean, we'd have these knockdown drag-out fights that would go on until the sun came up. Voices hoarse from yelling, throwing around accusations like confetti at a divorce party. Then we'd collapse from exhaustion, make up with desperate kisses and whispered apologies, swearing we'd never let it get that bad again. Rinse and repeat because apparently we were glutton for punishment. Clara used to call me her rock. And man did I eat that up with a spoon. She'd tell people at parties how I was the steady one. The reliable guy who kept her grounded when her head floated off into the clouds with all her big dreams and wild schemes. I wore that badge like it was some kind of medal of honor. Puffing out my chest whenever she'd introduce me as Jack, my anchor. What a naive idiot I was, never realizing that being someone's rock also meant I was about as exciting as watching paint dry. And just as easy to ignore when something more interesting came along. The signs started creeping in so slowly, I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. You know how it goes. Little things that seem insignificant until you string them all together and realize you're looking at a damn tapestry of neglect. Her hand stopped brushing my shoulder when she'd walk past me in the hallway. Used to be this automatic thing, this casual touch that said, "Hey, I see you. I love you." Then one day, I realized it had been weeks since I'd felt that gentle contact. And suddenly, I'm standing there like some kind of pathetic ghost, hoping for scraps of affection. She started smiling more at her phone than at me. And isn't that just a kick in the teeth? I'd walk into a room and catch her grinning at that damn screen. Thumbs flying across the keyboard, completely absorbed in whatever digital conversation was apparently more fascinating than anything I had to say. When I'd ask who she was texting, she'd give me this dismissive wave and mutter something about work or her sister or some friend I'd never heard of. But the smile would disappear the second she looked at me, like someone had flipped a switch, and all the joy just drained right out of her face. The worst part was watching our laughter slowly transform into silence. We used to crack each other up over the stupidest stuff. Bad movies, weird neighbors, inside jokes that probably weren't even that funny, but sent us into hysterics because we were young and in love, and everything seemed hilarious when you had someone to share it with. Those moments became rarer and rarer until our conversations consisted of logistics and grocery lists. And did you remember to pay the electric bill? That silence wasn't just quiet. It was this living, breathing wall that grew thicker every day. I'd try to break through it with jokes or stories about my day, but they'd fall flat against this invisible barrier Clara had constructed around herself. She'd nod politely, make the appropriate noises, but her eyes would be somewhere else entirely. It was like talking to a beautiful mannequin that occasionally moved its mouth to say, and that's nice, honey. I started analyzing every interaction, replaying conversations in my head like some kind of forensic investigator, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Was it something I said, something I didn't say? Was I too boring, too predictable, too much of that steady rock she used to claim she loved? The harder I tried to reconnect, the further she seemed to drift away, like I was trying to grab smoke with my bare hands. Friends would ask how married life was treating us, and I'd plaster on this fake smile and give them the standard answer. Great. Couldn't be better. Meanwhile, I was dying a slow death inside, watching the woman I'd promised to love and cherish gradually transform into a polite stranger who happened to share my bed and my Netflix password. The really twisted part, I kept believing we could fix it. I kept thinking that if I just tried harder, loved better, became more interesting somehow, I could win her back. Like she was some kind of prize I temporarily misplaced rather than a person who'd simply decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. I was so busy being her reliable rock that I forgot rocks don't feel pain when people step all over them. Looking back now, I can see I was already becoming invisible in my own life, fading into the background like wallpaper nobody notices until it starts peeling at the edges. But at the time, I just kept mixing that cement, convinced that with enough patience and the right formula, I could build something unbreakable. What a joke that turned out to be. You know what's funny? Everyone thinks yelling and screaming means a marriage is circling the drain. Hollywood's got us all convinced that the moment couples start throwing dishes and slamming doors, it's game over. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Silence is 1,000 times worse than any shouting match you could imagine. At least when Clara and I used to fight, there was passion behind it. Fire. Even if we were pissed off and saying things designed to hurt, we were still engaged with each other. We still cared enough to get worked up, to let our emotions spill out all over the place like some kind of messy human train wreck. But when she stopped fighting with me altogether, that's when I should have known I was truly screwed. The transition was so gradual, I almost missed it entirely. One day, we're having these epic battles that shake the walls, and the next thing I know, Clara's responding to everything with this infuriating smirk that made me want to punch something. Not her, obviously. I'm not that kind of guy, but maybe a wall or a pillow or one of those inflatable punching bags they sell at sporting goods stores for exactly this kind of situation. It started with the little disagreements first. I'd mentioned that maybe we should try a different restaurant for date night. Something other than that overpriced Italian place where the portions are smaller than a toddler's fist and the waiters act like they're doing you a personal favor by bringing you water. Instead of her usual, "But I love their tiramisu," followed by a playful argument about food preferences, I'd get this weird half smile and a shrug that said absolutely nothing and everything at the same time. When I'd ask her opinion on bigger stuff, should we repaint the living room? What did she think about maybe getting a dog? Did she want to visit my parents for Thanksgiving? She'd give me these responses that weren't really responses at all. Whatever you think is best, Jack, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're the responsible one. Each answer delivered with that same maddening smirk, like she was in on some joke that I wasn't clever enough to understand. The worst part was when I finally worked up the courage to ask the big question, the one that had been eating at me for months like some kind of emotional parasite. We were sitting on our couch. Well, my couch, since she'd claimed the recliner as her personal throne, and I just blurted it out during a commercial break. "Claire, are you happy? I mean, really happy with us?" She didn't even pause the TV. Didn't turn to look at me. Just kept staring at some stupid commercial for car insurance while that smirk spread across her face like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Why ask questions you already know the answers to? That sentence hit me like a freight train loaded with broken dreams and expired warranties. It hollowed me out from the inside, scooped out everything that used to be confident and hopeful, and left behind this empty shell that looked like Jack Carter but felt like a cheap knockoff. Because the thing is, I didn't know the answer. I was asking because I genuinely had no clue what was going on in her head anymore. But apparently, my ignorance was so obvious that even asking the question was pointless. But did I give up? Hell no. Because I'm Jack Carter, reliable to a fault. And quitters are for people who don't understand the value of hard work and determination. So, I doubled down on trying to fix whatever was broken between us. I planned date nights like I was organizing a military operation, researching restaurants, checking movie times, even buying her flowers from that fancy place downtown that charges $20 for what you can get at the grocery store for $5. She'd brush off every gesture with excuses that got more creative as time went on. "I'm too tired tonight. I've got that early meeting tomorrow." Sabrina and I already made plans. That last one became her go-to. Actually, once her sister moved in, and suddenly everything revolved around whatever drama was currently consuming Sabrina's life, I started talking less around the house, partly because every conversation felt like walking through a minefield, and partly because Clara had made it pretty clear that my thoughts and opinions ranked somewhere below the weather forecast in terms of importance. My jokes fell flat. My observations about work or current events got met with distracted nods. And my attempts at deeper conversations were deflected with the skill of a professional volleyball player. The silence that filled our house wasn't peaceful. It was thick and oppressive, like trying to breathe through wet concrete. I catch myself holding my breath sometimes just to see if anyone would notice. But Clara was always absorbed in her phone or her laptop or some conversation with Sabrina that apparently required whispering and giggling like they were plotting to overthrow a small government that I became a ghost in my own home, floating from room to room without making much impact on anything. In the mornings, I'd make coffee for both of us out of habit, but she'd already be gone or rushing out the door with a travel mug she'd filled herself. In the evenings, I'd ask about her day and get monosyllabic responses delivered without eye contact. Fine, busy, tired. To everyone else, I was still reliable Jack, the guy who showed up on time, paid his bills, remembered birthdays, and could be counted on to help you move furniture or fix your computer. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing one piece at a time. Like someone was slowly erasing me with one of those big pink erasers we used to use in elementary school. The crazy part was that I kept thinking it was temporary. Like maybe Clara was going through some kind of phase, dealing with stress at work or hormonal changes, or just needing some space to figure things out. I made excuses for her behavior the way you'd make excuses for a friend who keeps canceling plans. Maybe next time will be different. Maybe she'll remember why she used to enjoy my company. But deep down in that part of your brain that knows the truth, even when the rest of you is still clinging to hope, like a life preserver on a sinking ship, I was starting to understand that this wasn't a rough patch we were going through. This was who we'd become. This was our new normal. And it sucked worse than anything I could have imagined. The silence had won, and I didn't even know we were fighting a war. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more awkward in my own damn house, the universe decided to throw me a curveball that would make a major league pitcher jealous. Enter Sabrina, Clara's younger sister. Stage left with enough drama to power a small theater district. Sabrina was 26, fresh out of what she dramatically called the worst breakup in human history. Though, from what I could piece together, it sounded more like her boyfriend got tired of funding her lifestyle and decided to cut his losses. She showed up at our door on a Tuesday evening with 3 oversized suitcases, a house plant that looked half dead, and enough emotional baggage to sink a cruise ship. "I just need somewhere to crash for a few weeks," she announced, breezing past me like I was the doorman instead of the guy whose name was actually on the lease. "Just until I get back on my feet." Famous last words right there. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't completely heartless about the situation. Family is family and everyone goes through rough patches. Hell, Clara and I had been through our share of disasters, so I understood the need for a safety net. What I didn't understand was how quickly my own house would stop feeling like mine. Within the first week, Sabrina had somehow managed to colonize every inch of our modest 2-bedroom place. My home office, the tiny spare room where I actually worked to pay for the roof over all our heads, became her personal yoga studio. I'd come home from a long day of staring at code, looking forward to unwinding in my own space, only to find her contorted into some impossible position on a mat that took up the entire floor. "Oh, hey, Jack." She'd chirp upside down and downward dog or whatever the hell that pose was called. Just finishing up my evening flow. The energy in this room is absolutely perfect for my practice. Perfect for her practice, maybe. Terrible for my sanity. My desk got buried under her collection of essential oils, crystals, and self-help books with titles like Manifesting Your Best Life and Healing Your Inner Goddess. My filing cabinet became her dresser overflow. My comfortable office chair, the one I'd saved up for months to buy, was now draped with her sports bras and leggings that apparently needed to air dry in what used to be my sanctuary. But the office takeover was just the beginning. Sabrina's presence spread through our apartment like some kind of invasive species. The bathroom became a war zone of beauty products that I couldn't even pronounce. Where Clara and I used to have maybe 6 bottles total, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and the basics. Suddenly, every surface was covered with serums, masks, exfoliants, and mysterious potions that promised to do everything from detoxifying your pores to realigning your chakras. I go to brush my teeth and have to move 17 different bottles just to reach the toothpaste. My razor got buried behind some kind of jade roller that Sabrina swore was essential for lymphatic drainage, whatever the hell that meant. The shower looked like a Sephora had exploded in it. And don't even get me started on the laundry situation. Suddenly, every load became an archaeological expedition. Sabrina's clothes were everywhere, draped over chairs, hanging from doorwork knobs, spread across our couch like some kind of fabric installation art. She had this habit of doing laundry, and then just leaving it. What clothes would sit in the washer for days until they started to smell, then she'd rewash them and repeat the whole cycle. "I'm just so busy with my healing journey," she'd explain when Clara would gently suggest maybe putting clothes away. "I can't be bothered with mundane tasks when I'm working on my spiritual growth, right?" Spiritual growth. That must be what they're calling unemployment these days. But here's where things got really twisted. Clara absolutely lit up around her sister. It was like someone had flipped a switch that I didn't even know existed. The woman who could barely muster enthusiasm for a conversation with her own husband suddenly became this animated, laughing, energetic person. Whenever Sabrina was around, they'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. Sabrina's ex-boyfriend, who was apparently a narcissistic energy vampire. Their childhood memories, celebrity gossip, astrology, you name it. Clara would hang on every word like Sabrina was dispensing ancient wisdom instead of recycled pop psychology she'd picked up from Instagram influencers. The inside jokes started almost immediately. They'd reference things that happened before I came into the picture, or they developed new running gags that somehow always seemed to exclude me. They had this weird sisterly shorthand where one of them would start a sentence and the other would finish it, then they'd dissolve into giggles like they were still teenagers sharing secrets at a sleepover. Remember when we convinced Mom that Clara would start, that aliens had rearranged her garden gnomes? Sabrina would finish and they'd both crack up like it was the funniest thing in human history that I'd sit there on my own couch in my own living room feeling like I was watching a show I wasn't invited to be part of. Every shared glance, every burst of laughter, every inside reference drove home the same message. You're not part of this club, Jack. The morning routine became particularly brutal. I'd stumble into the kitchen looking for coffee. That sacred ritual that made me functional enough to face another day, only to find Sabrina already there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, chatting Clara's ear off about her dreams or her chakras, or whatever mystical nonsense was on her mind that day. Clara would be making elaborate coffee drinks for both of them. Fancy stuff with whipped cream, flavored syrups, cinnamon sprinkles, the whole 9 yards. These weren't just cups of coffee. They were Instagram-worthy works of art that probably took 20 minutes to construct. Meanwhile, my coffee maker, the simple, reliable machine that had served me faithfully for years, would be pushed to the back of the counter, unplugged and forgotten. My usual morning coffee would sit there getting cold while Clara fussed over Sabrina's complex beverage requirements. "Good morning, Jack." Sabrina would sing out like she was the hostess of this household instead of the unexpected guest who'd been temporarily crashing here for what was now going on 2 months' mourning. I'd mumble, reaching for my neglected coffee and trying not to let the bitterness show. And I'm not just talking about the coffee. The living room became their domain, too. Sabrina's friends started showing up for impromptu wine nights that nobody bothered to run by me first. I'd come home expecting a quiet evening, maybe catch up on some shows with Clara, only to find our living room had been transformed into some kind of support group. Meeting. 5 or 6 women would be scattered across our furniture, glasses of wine in hand, discussing their journeys and growth in toxic relationships, while our coffee table disappeared under a spread of cheese, crackers, and whatever expensive wine they decided was necessary for their healing circle. "Oh, Jack's home," Clara would announce like I was some kind of interesting visitor instead of the guy who lived there. "Ladies, you remember my husband, Jack?" They'd all turn and give me these polite smiles that somehow managed to be welcoming and dismissive at the same time, like I was a friendly dog who'd wandered into their important conversation. "Hi, Jack." They'd chorus, then immediately turn back to whatever earth-shattering discussion I'd interrupted that I realized standing there in my own living room with my cheap work clothes and my tired face that I had officially dropped a rung on the ladder in my own marriage. Hell, I dropped several rungs. Sabrina got the fancy coffee, the attention, the laughter, the late-night conversations. I got the leftovers of Clara's energy if there were any leftovers at all. And the worst part, I could feel myself slipping further down that ladder every single day. And I had no idea how to climb back up. The breaking point came at Clara's family house party. And let me tell you, when the universe decides to kick you in the teeth, it doesn't mess around with subtlety. This wasn't going to be some quiet moment of realization. Oh no. This was going to be a full-blown public execution disguised as a backyard barbecue. Every year, the Doyle family threw this massive get-together at Clara's parents' house. Picture your typical American suburban nightmare. A sprawling backyard with a deck that had seen better days, picnic tables covered in checkered tablecloths, and enough folding chairs to seat a small army. Mrs. Doyle would spend weeks preparing like she was hosting the freaking United Nations, making sure there was enough potato salad and coleslaw to feed half the county. This particular Saturday was one of those perfect late summer days that make you forget how much you hate everything. The sun was shining. There was a gentle breeze that kept things from getting too sticky. And the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid hung in the air like some kind of suburban incense. Under normal circumstances, I might have actually enjoyed myself. But these weren't normal circumstances, were they? The whole extended Doyle clan was there. And when I say extended, I mean extended. We're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Doyle, of course, along with Clara's aunts and uncles, cousins I'd met maybe twice in 8 years, old family friends who'd known Clara since she was in diapers, and neighbors who'd somehow earned permanent invitation status through years of borrowing lawnmowers and returning casserole dishes. I should have seen the warning signs from the moment we walked through the back gate. Clara immediately gravitated towards Sabrina, who was already holding court near the drink table, regaling a small crowd with what I assumed was another thrilling installment of her post-breakup spiritual awakening saga. They fell into their usual sister act, finishing each other's sentences, sharing meaningful looks, laughing at jokes that apparently required a secret decoder ring to understand on me. I did what I always did at these things. I grabbed a beer from the cooler, loaded up a paper plate with whatever Mrs. Doyle had deemed acceptable barbecue food, and found a quiet spot where I could blend into the background like suburban camouflage. That's where I was when it happened. Sitting on a folding chair that was definitely not designed for long-term comfort, working my way through a hot dog that had seen better days. When Sabrina decided to provide the evening's entertainment at my expense, she was already half in the bag, which wasn't exactly shocking considering she'd probably started drinking around noon. Sabrina had this way of getting progressively louder and more dramatic as the alcohol kicked in, like someone was slowly turning up the volume on a really obnoxious radio station. The conversation had been flowing around me. Something about someone's new job, someone else's vacation plans, the usual family party small talk that you participate in just enough to be polite. I was actually starting to relax, thinking maybe I could get through this whole thing without any major incidents. That's when Sabrina's voice cut through the background chatter like a rusty knife. "Hey, Jack," she called out loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. The entire backyard seemed to pause like someone had hit the mute button on a TV remote. "If Clara cheats on you with her true love, her high school boyfriend, will you whimper?" The silence that followed was deafening. I'm talking about the kind of quiet that makes you suddenly aware of every sound. The hiss of the grill, someone's beer bottle clinking against the table, a dog barking 3 houses over. Every single person in that backyard was staring at me, waiting to see how I'd react to being publicly humiliated by my sister-in-law. But Sabrina wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting warmed up. I looked at Clara hoping, praying for some sign that she was going to shut this down, that she was going to stand up for her husband of 8 years and tell her sister to knock it off. Instead, what I got was something so much worse that Clara's face lit up with this twisted kind of glee, like Sabrina had just handed her the perfect opportunity she'd been waiting for. She looked directly at me and with that same smirk I'd been seeing for months, she delivered the killing blow. "He's impotent in bed anyway." The backyard erupted. I'm not talking about polite chuckles or awkward laughs. This was full-blown hysteria. Uncle Bob nearly choked on his beer. Cousin Sarah was doubled over, wiping tears from her eyes. Mrs. Doyle was covering her mouth with her hand, but I could see her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Even Mr. Doyle, who usually tried to stay above the family drama, was grinning like he'd just heard the joke of the century. They were all laughing at me. Every single person in that yard, people I'd known for years, people I'd helped move furniture and fix computers and remember birthdays for, they were all having the time of their lives watching me get destroyed. That I sat there frozen, my face burning like someone had set it on fire. The hot dog in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My beer had gone warm and tasteless. Everything around me seemed to be happening in slow motion. The laughter getting louder and more vicious, faces twisted with amusement at my expense. Clara looking absolutely delighted with herself. For a moment, I felt like I was drowning, like I was underwater. And all that laughter was just noise from the surface, distorted and cruel. Part of me wanted to shrink into that folding chair until I disappeared completely. Part of me wanted to run for the gate and never look back. Part of me wanted to scream at all of them to tell them exactly what I thought of their twisted idea of entertainment. But then something shifted inside me. Something went perfectly crystallinely still. I looked at Clara, really looked at her. I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. The way she was savoring this moment like fine wine. I saw how proud she was of her little performance. How much she was enjoying watching me squirm. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental about our relationship that I'd been too blind or too stubborn to see before. This wasn't a woman who loved me, but was going through a rough patch. This wasn't someone who was temporarily lost and would find her way back to us. This was someone who had actively chosen to humiliate me in front of her entire family, who had weaponized our private life for public entertainment, who thought my pain was hilarious. I raised my hot dog slightly like I was making a toast. My voice came out calm and steady, cutting through the laughter like a blade through silk. Message received. Those 2 words hit the backyard like a bomb. The laughter died instantly, cut off so abruptly it was almost violent. Suddenly, everyone was looking uncomfortable, shifting in their chairs, finding fascinating things to stare at in their drinks. The only sound was the grill hissing and popping in the background. I stood up slowly, placed my warm beer down on the nearest table with deliberate care, and walked toward the side gate. I didn't run, didn't storm off in a dramatic huff. I just walked steady and purposeful like a man who had finally figured out exactly where he stood. That I didn't look back. Not once, but I could feel every eye in that yard watching me leave. And I could practically hear their collective realization that the joke had suddenly stopped being funny. Behind me, The silence stretched on, heavy and awkward, like a funeral where nobody knew quite what to say. Perfect. That night, I didn't sleep. Hell, I didn't even try. Sleep was for people who had something to wake up for. And I'd just discovered that everything I thought I was waking up for had been a lie wrapped in 8 years of self-deception. That I sat in my car in the driveway for what felt like hours, engine off, just staring at the house that was supposed to be my home. Through the living room window, I could see Clara and Sabrina on the couch, probably dissecting the evening's events like a couple of vultures picking over roadkill. Every so often, one of them would laugh, and I'd wonder if they were still getting mileage out of their public execution of my dignity. Around midnight, I finally went inside. They'd moved their little post-mortem party to Clara's bedroom. I could hear their voices through the door, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter that felt like nails on a chalkboard. I stood there in the hallway for a moment listening to my wife and her sister bond over my humiliation. And something inside me just broke. Not in a dramatic explosive way, but more like a dry branch that's been under pressure too long. One final stress and snap. Clean break. No going back. That I made my way to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. The guy looking back at me was a stranger. Red-rimmed eyes, shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world. The kind of defeated expression you see on people waiting in unemployment lines. When had I become this pathetic? When had I turned into the kind of man who would sit there and take that kind of abuse in front of an audience? But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you perfect clarity about exactly how far you've fallen. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it also shows you the way back up. I spent the next few hours in a weird kind of focused trance, like I was operating on autopilot while my conscious mind watched from somewhere outside my body. I moved through our apartment systematically, gathering everything that mattered, everything that was actually mine rather than ours. 2 duffel bags was all it took. 8 years of marriage and my entire independent existence fit into 2 pieces of luggage. Clothes obviously enough for a couple weeks. Nothing fancy. My laptop and all the work files I'd need to keep the freelance gigs going. Important documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport, insurance papers, all the bureaucratic proof that Jack Carter existed as something more than just Clara's disappointing husband. The emergency cash was hidden in a shoe box in the back of our bedroom closet. $3,000 in 20s and 50s that I'd been squirreling away for years. Originally intended for a surprise vacation or maybe a down payment on a better place. Clara knew about the savings account, but she'd never known about this little stash. Good thing, too, because it was about to become my lifeline. I moved quietly, careful not to wake the dynamic duo, who were probably still in there planning my next public humiliation. Every item I packed felt like a small declaration of independence. My favorite coffee mug, the one Clara always rolled her eyes at because it had a stupid joke about programmers on it. My collection of paperback sci-fi novels that she'd always called boy books. The camping gear I'd bought years ago when I still had fantasies about weekend adventures that never materialized. At 3 a.m. I sat down at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pen. The note I left was short and sweet. Hope the joke was worth it. That was it. No long explanation, no emotional goodbye, no list of grievances or demands for better treatment. Just 7 words that said everything that needed to be said. I placed it in the exact center of the table where Clara would be sure to see it when she came out for her morning coffee. Then I did something I'd been planning for weeks, but never had the guts to follow through on. I pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying around like a talisman, the one that contained divorce papers. I'd quietly prepared during my lunch breaks. I told myself I was just being practical, just covering my bases in case things got worse. Turns out things could always get worse than you imagined. I placed the envelope right next to the note. Let her explain that to Sabrina over their fancy coffee with whipped cream and sprinkles. By 4 a.m. I was loading my bags into my car. The neighborhood was dead quiet. The kind of pre-dawn stillness where every sound seems amplified. My car door closing sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I half expected lights to start coming on, neighbors peering out their windows to see what was happening, but the world stayed dark and peaceful. That I drove out of that subdivision like I was escaping from prison, which wasn't far from the truth. Every mile between me and that house felt like shedding another layer of the pathetic person I'd become. The radio was playing some melancholy late-night song about lost love and second chances, but I turned it off. I didn't need a soundtrack for this moment. The silence was perfect. I'd done my homework during all those sleepless nights when Clara was busy ignoring me. I'd researched remote locations, places where a guy could disappear without anyone asking uncomfortable questions. The mountains had always called to me anyway back when I was young enough to think adventure was something that happened to people like me. The cabin I'd found was perfect in its simplicity. I'd contacted the owner, an old-timer named Franklin, through a series of emails where I'd been deliberately vague about my circumstances. All he cared about was that I could pay in cash and that I wasn't planning to burn the place down or turn it into a meth lab. Privacy guaranteed, no questions asked, he promised. And something in his voice told me he understood exactly what kind of privacy I was looking for. The drive took 4 hours through increasingly winding mountain roads. As the sun started to come up, I found myself climbing through forests that seemed to stretch on forever, past lakes that looked like mirrors reflecting the sky, through small towns that probably hadn't changed much since the 1950s that I stopped for gas and coffee at a little station that looked like it had been transported from another era. The guy behind the counter nodded at me like we were old friends, asked if I was heading up to do some fishing, and didn't seem to think there was anything strange about a guy in business casual clothes buying supplies at dawn on a Sunday morning. "Good fishing weather," he said, handing me my change. "That's what I'm hoping for," I replied, and realized it was the first honest thing I'd said to another person in months. It'd be why the time I reached Franklin's cabin, the sun was fully up and painting everything in shades of golden green that made the whole world look like a postcard. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by pine trees so tall they seemed to touch the clouds, with a little stream running behind it that sounded like nature's own white noise machine. Franklin was waiting for me on the porch, coffee cup in hand, looking exactly like Central Casting would order if they needed someone to play Wise Mountain Man. Gray beard, flannel shirt, boots that had seen some serious miles. "You, Jack?" he asked. "That's me." "Good. Keys are on the kitchen table, propane's full, firewood stacked on the side. Nearest neighbor's about 5 miles that way," he pointed toward a gap in the trees. "And they mind their own business, same as I do." He finished his coffee, set the cup down on the porch railing, and headed for an old pickup truck that looked like it had been through a few wars. "Anything else you need to know?" he asked. "I think I've got it figured out," he nodded approvingly. "Most folks who come up here do, and just like that, I was alone. Completely, utterly alone for the first time in years. I stood on that porch breathing air that actually smelled clean. Listening to nothing but wind in the trees and water running over rocks, and felt something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. Life at the cabin became something I'd never experienced before. Beautifully, gloriously simple. No schedules dictated by someone else's moods. No walking on eggshells wondering if I'd accidentally said something that would earn me another dose of silent treatment. No competing for attention in my own damn home. Just me, the mountains, and the kind of quiet that actually lets you hear yourself think. The first week was rough, I'll admit. Not because I missed Clara. Hell no, but because I'd forgotten how to exist without constantly monitoring someone else's emotional temperature. I kept catching myself listening for footsteps in the hallway, bracing for the sound of a door slamming somewhere in the house. It took my nervous system about a week to figure out that the only drama happening here was whether I wanted coffee or tea with breakfast. My days develop their own rhythm. The kind of natural flow that happens when you're not constantly adapting to someone else's chaos. I'd wake up when my body felt like waking up. Usually around sunrise, which up here meant being greeted by light filtering through pine trees like nature's own cathedral. No alarm clock, no scrambling to get ready while someone hogged the bathroom. No starting my day already stressed about what mood I'd be walking into. Coffee became a ritual instead of a necessity. I'd make a pot using water from the well behind the cabin. Water that actually tasted like water instead of the chlorinated stuff we got in the suburbs, and sit on the front porch watching the mist rise off the little stream that ran behind the property. Sometimes deer would wander through the clearing and we'd eye each other with mutual respect. They minded their business. I minded mine. The freelance programming work was easier than I'd expected. Turns out when you're not constantly interrupted by passive-aggressive comments and household drama, you can actually focus on code for hours at a time. I'd set up my laptop on the kitchen table by the window and lose myself in the logical, predictable world of algorithms and databases. Problems had clear solutions here. If something was broken, you fixed it. If code didn't work, you debugged it until it did. No hidden meanings, no emotional landmines, no wondering if your attempts to help were actually making things worse. The money situation worked out better than I'd hoped without Clara's expensive coffee habits. Sabrina's endless stream of Amazon packages, and the general financial bleeding that came from supporting 2 adults who treated money like it was infinite. My modest freelance income actually stretched pretty far. The cabin rent was cheap, groceries were basic, and my entertainment budget consisted mainly of library books and hiking boots. Speaking of hiking, Jesus, I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually use my body for something besides sitting in front of a computer and absorbing emotional punishment. The mountains around here were laced with trails that ranged from easy walks to serious climbs that left me gasping but satisfied in ways I hadn't felt in years. That I started small, following the marked trail that wound along the stream for a couple miles before looping back. But as my legs got stronger and my lungs adapted to the altitude, I got more ambitious. There were peaks up here that offered views that made you understand why people write poetry about nature. Standing on a rocky outcrop at 8,000 feet, looking out over valleys that stretch to the horizon, you start to get some perspective on how small your problems really are. The physical work was a revelation. Franklin had left behind a decent pile of seasoned firewood, but I could see I'd need more to get through the winter if I planned to stay that long. So, I learned to split wood, which turned out to be incredibly therapeutic. There's something primal and satisfying about swinging an axe, feeling it bite into the wood, watching a log split clean down the middle. Each swing was like chopping away another piece of the passive, beaten down version of myself I'd become at him. My hands got tough and calloused from the axe handle and from stacking wood. My shoulders broadened from hauling logs and water buckets. I dropped weight without trying, partly from all the physical activity, partly because I was actually eating real food instead of stress eating my way through whatever Clara had deemed acceptable for our kitchen. Hank, who ran the little general store about 10 miles down the mountain, became my main connection to the outside world. He was the kind of guy who'd probably seen every type of person who came up to these mountains looking for something or running from something. He never asked questions beyond you finding everything you need and how's that cabin treating you? I'd drive down once a week for supplies and we'd have these comfortable conversations about practical things, weather patterns, which trails were in good shape, whether the old logging road was passable after the recent rain. Hank had opinions about everything but kept them to himself unless asked directly. He'd nod approvingly when I started buying actual food instead of just canned goods and instant meals. Man's got to eat real food if he's going to do real work, he'd say, ringing up my purchase of fresh vegetables and decent meat. The evenings were when the real healing happened. I'd built up a routine of cooking an actual dinner. Nothing fancy, but real food prepared with attention instead of just fuel to get through another day. I'd eat by lantern light because there's something about electric lights that feels too harsh when you're trying to decompress from civilization. After dinner, I'd read by the fire. Franklin had left behind a collection of books that ran the gamut from classic literature to survival guides to philosophy. I worked my way through authors I'd always meant to read, but never had time for when my evenings were consumed by navigating Clara's moods and Sabrina's drama. There's a particular kind of silence you get in the mountains at night. It's not the absence of sound. There are owls calling, wind moving through the trees, the stream babbling in the background, but it's the absence of human noise, human conflict, human. You realize how much energy you've been spending just processing other people's chaos. That I'd sit there by the fire, book in my lap, and actually think about things, not worry about them or stress about them, just think. I thought about who I'd been before I met Clara, back when I had opinions and preferences and plans that weren't filtered through someone else's approval. I thought about what I wanted from life beyond just surviving each day without getting emotionally beaten down. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to be content. Not ecstatically happy, not in love, not chasing some dramatic high, just quietly satisfied with where I was and what I was doing. I wasn't Jack the disappointing husband, or Jack, the convenient target for someone else's frustrations. I was just Jack, a guy who split wood and wrote code and hiked trails and read books and went to bed when he was tired instead of when someone else decided the evening was over. The best part was the complete absence of performance anxiety. I didn't have to be charming or entertaining or useful to anyone. I didn't have to monitor my words for potential offense or gauge someone else's mood before speaking. I could just exist without commentary or criticism or passive-aggressive suggestions for improvement. Point. One evening about 2 months in, I was sitting on the porch after a particularly good day. I'd finished a coding project that paid well. Hiked to a new lake I'd been meaning to explore and made a dinner that actually tasted like something a competent adult would prepare. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of orange and purple that no camera could capture. That I realized I was smiling. Not the forced performative smile I'd gotten used to wearing around Clara, but an actual genuine expression of contentment. I couldn't remember the last time that it happened. That's when I knew I wasn't just hiding out up here. I was actually building something. A life that was mine, shaped by my choices, lived at my pace. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. 3 months into my mountain exile, curiosity finally got the better of me. I'd been living in this blissful bubble of digital silence. But let's be honest, even the most dedicated hermit eventually wonders what kind of storm they left behind. It was like having a scab you know you shouldn't pick at. But the temptation becomes irresistible. The drive down to town felt longer than usual, probably because I was dreading what I might find. I'd gotten comfortable with my new reality where the only emails I received were work-related and the only drama in my life involved whether to take the North Trail or the South Trail for my afternoon hike. But reality has this annoying habit of tracking you down, even when you're doing your best to avoid it. The public library in town was one of those small-town institutions that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. And I'm talking about Jimmy Carter, not me. Fluorescent lights that hummed like angry bees, computers that took about 5 minutes to boot up, and that particular smell of old books mixed with industrial-strength cleaning products that all libraries seem to have. That I found an empty terminal in the back corner as far from the librarian's desk as possible. Not that I was doing anything illegal, but something about logging into my old email felt vaguely illicit, like I was sneaking back into a house I'd already moved out of. My inbox was a digital crime scene. 67 unread messages, most of them from Clara, with subject lines that told the whole story of her emotional journey over the past 3 months. It was like reading the stages of grief played out in Gmail notifications. The first batch sent within hours of my disappearance were pure rage. Where the hell are you? This is ridiculous, Jack. You can't just run away like a child. Call me now. I could practically hear her voice through the screen. That particular tone she used when she was pissed off, but trying to maintain some semblance of moral high ground. The messages themselves were masterpieces of deflection and blame shifting. According to Clara's version of events, I was being overly sensitive and dramatic. The party incident was just a joke that I'd blown completely out of proportion because I couldn't take a little teasing. Everyone thinks you're being ridiculous, she wrote in one particularly charming message. Sabrina feels terrible about the whole thing, but you're making it into this huge deal when it was just family having fun. Right. Family having fun. Because nothing says fun like publicly humiliating your spouse in front of 30 people. As the days passed and I didn't respond, the tone shifted from anger to manipulation. Clara had always been a master at this particular art form. The subtle guilt trip disguised as concern. I'm worried about you, Jack. This isn't like you. Whatever's going on, we can work through it together. I miss my husband. Please come home so we can talk. These messages were particularly nauseating because they were written like she was the victim in the situation. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong by refusing to stick around and be her emotional punching bag. She'd managed to completely rewrite history in her own mind, transforming herself from the aggressor into the abandoned wife whose husband had inexplicably vanished without cause. But it was the third phase that really showed me who Clara had become, or maybe who she'd always been. And I'd just been too blind to see it. When emotional manipulation didn't work, she moved on to practical concerns. I can't pay the mortgage alone. The insurance company needs both our signatures. Your student loan payment bounced. Please at least call me. I need your help with the finances. There it was laid out in black and white. After 3 months of radio silence, after all the anger and guilt trips and fake concern, what Clara really missed about me wasn't my companionship or my love or even my presence. What she missed was my wallet and my organizational skills. That I kept scrolling through the messages, watching her desperation increase with each passing week. The grammar got sloppier, the tone more frantic. She'd clearly figured out that I wasn't just taking a weekend to cool off. I was actually gone and I wasn't coming back to clean up her messes. Mixed in with Clara's increasingly unhinged messages were a few emails from Maya, our mutual friend, who'd somehow managed to stay neutral during our relationship's slow-motion car crash. Mia's messages were refreshingly honest and gave me the outside perspective I needed on what was happening back in civilization. According to Maya, my disappearance had created a domino effect that was still toppling pieces 3 months later. Turns out I'd been the invisible glue holding together more than just my marriage. I'd been managing Clara's father's construction accounts, keeping track of the Byzantine mess of invoices and payments that kept his small business afloat. I'd been running the books for Clara's mother's online boutique, handling everything from inventory tracking to tax preparation. Hell, I'd even been auto-paying Clara's student loans because she could never remember when they were due. Without me quietly handling all the behind-the-scenes financial stuff, their whole family's economic ecosystem had started collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Mr. Doyle's construction business lost 3 major contracts because nobody could find the paperwork for ongoing jobs. Invoices went out late, payments got missed, and clients started looking for more reliable contractors. The man who'd laughed the loudest at my public humiliation was now scrambling to save a business he'd built over 20 years. Dumb Mrs. Doyle's boutique was even worse. Without my inventory management system, she'd been ordering duplicate items while running out of bestsellers. Her bookkeeping was such a disaster that she'd missed several tax deadlines and was now dealing with penalties and interest charges that were eating into what little profit she had left. Maya mentioned that Mrs. Doyle had actually asked Clara if there was any way to get Jack to help with the books, just temporarily. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The same people who'd found my humiliation so entertaining were now discovering exactly how much work I'd been doing behind the scenes. Work they'd taken for granted because I'd never made a big deal about it. But the real kicker was Clara herself. According to Maya, my dear wife was drowning in debt and bureaucracy. The mortgage payments were behind, the utilities had been shut off twice, and she'd maxed out both credit cards, trying to keep everything afloat. She'd tried to take over the financial management herself, but quickly discovered that staying organized requires more than just good intentions. She keeps asking me if I've heard from you, Maya wrote. I think she's finally starting to understand how much you were doing that she never noticed. She's definitely not the same person who was making jokes at that party. I leaned back in the uncomfortable library chair and stared at the screen. Part of me, a very small, petty part, felt a certain satisfaction at learning that my absence had consequences. For years, I'd felt invisible and unappreciated, like I could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice. Turns out, I was half right. They hadn't noticed my contributions until they were gone. But boy, they were noticing now. The bigger part of me, though, just felt tired. Tired of being angry. Tired of carrying around resentment like a heavy backpack. Tired of defining myself by what other people had done to me. I'd spent 3 months building a new life. And dwelling on the wreckage of the old one felt like a step backward that I closed the browser without responding to any of the messages. Whatever was happening back in the suburbs wasn't my problem anymore. I'd filed the divorce papers. I'd left the note. I'd made my position clear. If Clara wanted to reach me, she had my lawyer's contact information. The drive back up the mountain felt like returning to sanity after visiting a psychiatric ward. With each mile of elevation, the weight of other people's drama lifted off my shoulders. By the time I reached the cabin, I'd already started forgetting the details of Clara's messages. I had firewood to split and code to write and trails to explore. The past could take care of itself. A year later, I was splitting firewood behind the cabin when I heard a car engine struggling up the gravel road. The sound was wrong. Too much grinding, not enough power, like someone was pushing an old sedan way beyond its comfort zone on mountain terrain. I paused mid-swing, axe suspended above my head, listening to the engine cough and whee its way closer. Nobody came up here by accident. The road to Franklin's cabin wasn't on any GPS system, and you had to make several deliberate turns off increasingly sketchy back roads to find it. Whoever was driving up here knew exactly where they were going, which meant they were looking for me specifically. My first thought was that maybe it was Franklin coming to check on his property or collect rent. But Franklin drove a pickup truck that sounded like it could climb mountains in its sleep. Not whatever piece of automotive desperation was currently struggling up my driveway. The car that finally emerged from the tree-in was a beat-up Honda Civic that looked like it had seen better decades. The paint had faded to that particular shade of gray that used to be some other color, and I could hear something rattling in the engine that definitely wasn't supposed to be rattling. It pulled up next to my truck and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled down. Then the driver's door opened and Clara stepped out that I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the put-together woman who used to spend an hour getting ready for a trip to the grocery store. This version of Clara looked like she'd been through a blender set on rough year. Her hair was longer and less styled, pulled back in a simple ponytail that suggested function over fashion. She was wearing jeans that actually looked worn from use rather than purchased pre-distressed and a jacket that had clearly seen some serious mileage. But it was her face that really told the story. The smugness was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen there before. Genuine humility mixed with exhaustion. She looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy load for a long time and was finally ready to set it down. It was starting to rain. One of those mountain storms that comes out of nowhere and immediately soaks everything in sight. Clara stood next to her car for a moment, getting drenched like she wasn't sure she had the right to approach my porch without permission. "Jack," she said, and her voice was different, too. Smaller, less certain. None of the edge I'd gotten used to over the last years of our marriage. I stuck the axe in the chopping block and walked over to the porch, not exactly inviting her up, but not telling her to leave either. She followed, water dripping from her hair, clutching a manila envelope that was getting soaked in the downpour. "I brought the signed divorce papers," she said, holding up the envelope like a peace offering. "Everything's finalized. I'm not here to beg you to come back." That caught me off guard. I've been preparing for some kind of emotional manipulation. Maybe another attempt to guilt me into fixing her financial disasters. But this Clara seemed different, deflated in a way that suggested she'd already accepted defeat. "Then why are you here?" I asked, settling into one of the wooden chairs Franklin had left on the porch. After a moment's hesitation, Clara took the other chair, still clutching the wet envelope. "I'm here to say I'm sorry," she said, And the words came out like they'd been stuck in her throat for months. I destroyed the best thing in my life. And I need you to know that I know that. I didn't say anything, just waited. In my experience, when someone finally decides to tell the truth, the best thing you can do is let them get it all out without interruption. I've been in therapy, she continued, staring out at the rain instead of looking at me. For about 6 months now, Dr. Martinez, she's helped me understand some things about myself that I didn't want to face. She was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts or maybe her courage. I let Sabrina poison me against you, she said finally. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. She was jealous of what we had, of how stable you were, how reliable. She couldn't stand that I had something she didn't, so she started picking at it, making little comments about how boring you were, how you never did anything exciting. Clara wiped rain from her face, though it was hard to tell if it was just rain. I should have shut her down. I should have defended you. Instead, I started seeing you through her eyes. Started focusing on everything you weren't instead of everything you were. And the more I pulled away, the more you tried to fix things, which just made me more irritated because I thought you were being needy. She let out a bitter laugh that had no humor in it. God, Jack, you were trying to save our marriage, and I was annoyed that you cared enough to try. What kind of person does that make me? I could have answered that question, but I didn't. She was doing fine figuring it out on her own. That night at the party, she continued, when Sabrina made that comment about you whimpering, I had a choice. I could defend my husband of 8 years, or I could go for the cheap laugh, and I chose the laugh. She finally looked at me then, and I could see she was crying, though. The rain made it hard to distinguish tears from raindrops. I chose the laugh, Jack. I threw away 8 years of marriage for a 30-second joke that wasn't even funny. And the worst part is, I felt proud of myself afterward, like I'd won something. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming on the porch roof and creating a curtain of water around us. We sat there in our bubble of sound. Two people who used to share everything now sharing one last honest conversation. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I'd been treating you like my emotional dumping ground for years. Clara said, every time I was frustrated or scared or feeling small, I'd take it out on you because I knew you'd absorb it without fighting back. I mistook your kindness for weakness, your stability for boring predictability. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. I turned you into my punching bag and then I resented you for letting me hit you. How up is that? Pretty up. I agreed, speaking for the first time since she'd started talking. I know apologies don't erase scars, she said. I know I can't undo the damage I did, but I needed you to know that I understand what I lost. Not just the financial support or the household management or all the practical stuff you did that kept our lives running smoothly. I lost the only person who ever loved me enough to put up with my worst impulses. She stood up, the signed divorce papers still in her hand. I won't insult your intelligence by asking you to forgive me, she said. I just wanted you to know that the woman who smirked at you that night, who thought your pain was entertaining, that wasn't who I really am. Or maybe it was who I'd become, but it's not who I want to be anymore. She set the envelope on the small table between our chairs. You deserve better than what I gave you, Jack. You always did. I hope you find it. She walked back to her car through the rain, moving like someone who'd finally set down a burden they've been carrying for too long. I watched her drive away, the sound of her struggling engine fading into the distance until all I could hear was rain on the roof and water running in the gutters. That I sat there for a long time after she left, holding the divorce papers, thinking about closure and forgiveness and the strange relief that comes from finally hearing someone acknowledge the truth. Clara was right about one thing. Apologies don't erase scars, but sometimes they help you understand that the scars have already healed and you're stronger than you thought. The storm passed the way mountain storms do, leaving everything clean and new. I went back to splitting firewood and for the first time in over a year, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just free. The full scope of the fallout didn't become clear until Maya decided to spill the tea about 6 months after Clara's rain-soaked confession visit. Maya had always been the kind of friend who stayed connected to everyone's drama without getting personally invested in it. Sort of like a war correspondent for suburban disasters. She'd drive up to the cabin every few months with groceries, local gossip, and updates on the civilized world that I'd left behind. This particular visit, she came bearing news that was so satisfying I almost felt guilty about enjoying it. Almost. You're not going to believe what's happened to the Doyle family, she said, settling into her usual spot on the porch with a beer and the gleeful expression people get when they're about to share particularly juicy gossip. According to Maya's intelligence network, which was basically every hairdresser, grocery store clerk, and coffee shop employee in a 20-meter radius, my strategic disappearance had triggered a domino effect that was still toppling pieces a year and a half later. Clara had officially declared bankruptcy about 3 months after her cabin visit. Turns out when you're used to having someone else manage all the adult responsibilities in your life, learning to do it yourself while drowning in debt is a pretty steep learning curve. The mortgage went into foreclosure. The credit cards got maxed out and defaulted. And she'd even managed to get her car repossessed, which explained the beat-up Honda she'd driven up the mountain. But Clara's financial collapse was just the appetizer. The main course was what had happened to her parents' businesses. Mr. Doyle's construction company, the one he built over 20 years of early mornings and weekend work, was basically finished. Without my meticulous record-keeping, he'd lost track of project timelines, material orders, and client payments. The chaos had started small but snowballed quickly. "Remember the Henderson renovation?" Maya asked, referring to a big job that Mr. Doyle had been working on when I vanished. "Jack. He ordered the wrong windows 3 times because nobody could find the original specifications. By the time they figured it out, the Hendersons had hired a different contractor and sued for the deposit. It got worse. A commercial job at the new shopping center had fallen apart when Mr. Doyle couldn't provide the insurance documentation on time. Another client fired him when they discovered he double-ordered materials and tried to charge them for the mistake. Word travels fast in the construction business, and pretty soon, nobody wanted to hire a contractor who couldn't keep his paperwork straight. He's basically down to small handyman jobs now, Ma said, fixing leaky faucets and painting bedrooms. The man who used to have 6 guys working for him is now working alone out of his garage. Mrs. Doyle's boutique had suffered an even more spectacular collapse. Without my inventory management system, she'd managed to create a retail nightmare that would have been impressive if it weren't so completely avoidable. She ordered 50 summer dresses in January and no winter coats until March. Maya laughed. Then she forgot to track returns, so people were bringing back items she didn't even remember selling. The IRS got involved when she missed quarterly payments because she couldn't figure out how much tax she owed. The boutique had officially closed its doors about 8 months after I'd left. Mrs. Doyle had tried to sell the remaining inventory at a massive loss, but even that had backfired when she discovered half of it was damaged from poor storage. The final insult came when she found out she owed the shopping center 3 months of back rent because she'd been calculating the lease payments wrong. "She's working at Target now," Maya said, shaking her head. "Customer service. The woman who used to talk about her entrepreneurial spirit is asking people if they found everything they were looking for." But the real cherry on top of this disaster Sunday was what had happened to Sabrina, the architect of my public humiliation. After the party, when word had spread about how spectacularly the Doyle family's finances had imploded following my departure, Sabrina had quickly become the family scapegoat. Everyone remembered her drunk commentary about my potential whimpering, and they'd started connecting dots between her influence on Clara and the subsequent destruction of their little empire. "Nobody wants to be around her anymore," Maya explained. "She's like a walking reminder of how badly they screwed up. CL's cousins won't return her calls. The neighbors avoid her. Even her old friends have distanced themselves." Sabrina had bounced around for a while, crashing on couches and burning through the goodwill of anyone willing to help her. But her dramatic personality and tendency to treat other people's homes like her personal drama stage had worn thin quickly. One by one, her options had disappeared until she'd been forced to move back in with her parents. "She's 35 years old and sleeping in her childhood bedroom," Maya said with obvious delight. "Same room, same furniture, same live, laugh, love poster on the wall from when she was 16. Mr. and Mrs. Doyle barely talk to her. She's like the ghost of their family's former success. The family gatherings that used to be celebrations had turned into tense affairs where everyone blamed everyone else for their collective downfall." Maya had heard through the grapevine that last Thanksgiving had been a complete disaster with multiple arguments breaking out over who was responsible for driving Jack away. "Clara actually defended you," Maya said. "Can you believe that? She told everyone that they'd treated you terribly and that you'd had every right to leave. It caused a huge fight with her dad, who apparently said something about how you'd been too sensitive, and Clara lost it on him." The irony was beautiful in its completeness. The same people who'd found my humiliation so entertaining were now turning on each other as their world crumbled around them. The party that was supposed to be a fun family gathering had become the moment that marked the beginning of their collective downfall. "The best part," Maya continued, clearly saving the most delicious detail for last, "is that they keep talking about you like you're some kind of criminal mastermind who planned this whole thing. Like you somehow orchestrated their financial collapse from your secret mountain lair." She gestured around at the simple cabin, the chopped firewood, the basic setup that represented my new life. "They can't accept that they just took you for granted and didn't realize how much you were holding together behind the scenes. They'd rather believe you're some kind of vengeful genius than admit they treated their most reliable family member like garbage." I leaned back in my chair, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and tried to summon some sympathy for the people who'd made my life miserable for years. I came up empty. You know what the funny thing is? I said to Maya, I didn't plan any of this. I just left. Everything that happened after that was entirely their own doing. That's what makes it so perfect. Maya replied. You gave them exactly what they said they wanted. A life without boring, reliable Jack. Turns out boring and reliable were the only things keeping their house of cards from collapsing. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into evening. Somewhere down in the valley, the Doyle family was probably having another tense dinner, stepping carefully around the wreckage of their former lives, trying not to mention the elephant in the room that used to manage their finances and keep their world running smoothly. Up here in the mountains, I was grilling a simple dinner and planning tomorrow's hike. I'd never felt more content in my life. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while your enemies destroy themselves. 2 years have passed since I walked through that side gate at the Doyle family barbecue. And I'm sitting here on my porch watching the morning mist rise off the mountains, thinking about how one moment of clarity can change everything. It's funny how the worst day of your old life can become the doorway to the best chapter of your new one. I bought Franklin's cabin when he decided to retire to Arizona. Too many winters up here for these old bones, he'd said. But I suspected he'd been planning this transition all along. Maybe he saw something in me that first day that told him I was going to be more than just a temporary renter. The paperwork was simple. Franklin wasn't the type of guy who believed in complicated legal maneuvers when a handshake and a fair price would do the job. Oh, now I'm a homeowner again. But this time it's different. This place belongs to me in ways that suburban house never did. Every improvement I make, every piece of firewood I split, every trail I clear, it's all mine, shaped by my choices and my labor. There's something deeply satisfying about owning something you've actually earned rather than something you're just making payments on. The freelance programming work evolved into something more substantial over time. Word gets around in the tech world when you're reliable and good at what you do. And apparently living in the mountains doesn't hurt your reputation when your clients are scattered across 3 time zones. Anyway, I've got a steady roster of companies that send me projects and the work is interesting enough to keep me engaged without being so demanding that it takes over my life. The best part is that I control my schedule completely. If I want to take a Wednesday off to hike to the lake, I do it. If I feel like working until midnight because I'm in the zone with a particularly challenging piece of code, there's nobody around to complain about the keyboard clicking or the extra coffee I'm making. It's amazing how much more productive you can be when you're not constantly managing someone else's emotional needs. But the real change in my life came about 8 months ago when I met Leah on the trail to Bear Creek Falls. I'd been hiking alone for over a year by then, perfectly content with my own company. When I came around a bend and nearly collided with this woman in park ranger gear who was examining something on the ground. Sorry, I said, stepping aside to give her room. Didn't mean to interrupt whatever scientific thing you're doing there. She looked up with this smile that was part amusement, part curiosity. Scientific thing? I'm trying to figure out if this is bear scat or just a really unfortunate pile of berries. That's definitely bear scat, I said, and she laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite social noise people make when they're being nice. Well, look at you, mountain man. Got yourself a degree in wildlife biology while I wasn't looking. Nope. Just common sense. In a year and a half of living up here, you learn to recognize the signs pretty quickly when your nearest neighbor is 5 miles away and doesn't carry pepper spray. That was the beginning of something I hadn't expected to find again. A connection with another person that felt natural instead of exhausting. Leo was stationed at the ranger office about 15 miles down the mountain, responsible for trail maintenance and wildlife monitoring across a territory that included my little corner of the wilderness. She started stopping by every few weeks, initially just to check on the cabin and make sure I wasn't doing anything that would get her in trouble with the Forest Service. But those official visits gradually turned into longer conversations, then shared meals, then overnight stays that felt comfortable rather than complicated. Leah thinks my quiet strength is attractive, not boring. She appreciates that I can fix things that break, that I know how to be alone without being lonely, that I don't need constant entertainment or validation to feel content. The qualities that Clara had found so insufferably dull are exactly what Leah values in a partner. You're like a Swiss Army knife, she told me one evening as we were cooking dinner together. Practical, reliable, always useful, but not in a boring way. This guy actually knows how to handle life way. It's amazing how different a relationship feels when the other person actually likes who you are instead of tolerating you while hoping you'll change into someone more exciting. Leah and I cook simple meals and take long hikes and read books by the fire. And none of it feels like settling or compromising. It feels like living that we don't live together. She's got her own place closer to town. And we both value our independence too much to rush into cohabitation. But she's here most weekends and I stay at her place sometimes when I need to be closer to civilization for work meetings or supply runs. It's a relationship built on choice rather than convenience, which makes it feel solid in ways my marriage never did. Sometimes, usually when I'm doing something completely ordinary like splitting wood or updating code or planning a hiking route, I remember that party. I can still see Clara's smirk, still hear the laughter that followed her cutting remark, still feel the heat in my face as I sat there absorbing their collective amusement at my expense. But instead of anger or humiliation, what I feel now is something close to gratitude. That moment of public humiliation gave me perfect clarity about exactly where I stood in my own marriage. It stripped away all the self-deception and wishful thinking and showed me the raw truth. I was married to someone who found my pain entertaining. Walking through that side gate was the beginning of everything good in my current life. If Clara hadn't shown me exactly who she was that night, I might have spent years more trying to save something that was already dead. I might never have discovered what it feels like to be genuinely appreciated rather than merely tolerated. The divorce was finalized months ago without any drama. Clara signed the papers. We split what little assets remained after her financial collapse. And that was it. 8 years of marriage reduced to a legal document and a forwarded mail address. I felt nothing when it was done. No sadness, no relief, just the mild satisfaction of completing a necessary task. I heard through Maya that Clara eventually got her life together, more or less. She's working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, living in a modest apartment, and apparently doing well in therapy. I'm genuinely glad she found some stability, though I have no desire to be part of it. The Doyle family has largely faded into irrelevance as far as I'm concerned. They're still dealing with the consequences of their collective choices. Still probably wondering how their stable family structure collapsed so completely after one party. I don't think about them much anymore, except occasionally when Maya brings news that reminds me how much better my life is now than it was when I was trying to earn their approval. I've learned the difference between being useful and being valued. And I'll never confuse the two again. I've learned that some bridges are worth burning if they're leading to places you don't want to go. Most importantly, I've learned that the worst thing that can happen to you sometimes turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to you. These days, I wake up in a place I chose with work I enjoy next to a woman who thinks I'm exactly who she wants to be with. I make my own coffee, plan my own days, and go to bed when I'm tired instead of when someone else decides the evening is over. I never looked back through that gate, and I never will. The peace I found on the other side was worth every moment of humiliation it took to find it.
That brings this story to an end. Honestly, a pretty interesting one if you ask me. Let me know your thoughts down below, and let's start with the next one right away. This one is titled,
My son's commanding officer beat him in the base as a concerned father. The colonel said, Your son is a liar. I have 40 witnesses. Get out before I have you arrested. I said, You have 15 minutes to confess the truth. He called security. 12 minutes later, Pentagon called him. Sir, the man you threatened is. Chapter 1, The Quiet Before. Dalton Larson had spent 23 years in military intelligence before retiring to what most people would call a quiet life. Most people didn't know that retirement meant consulting directly with the Secretary of Defense on matters that never made it to briefings or reports. They didn't know that the modest house in Alexandria, Virginia, contained a secure communication room that connected him to some of the most powerful people in the Pentagon. His wife, Melissa, knew she'd been a Marine Corps logistics officer when they met, and she understood the weight of secrets. Their son, Mitch, knew his father had served, but like most 22-year-olds, he was more focused on building his own path. The kid had joined the Army against Dalton's initial wishes. Not because Dalton didn't respect the service, but because he knew exactly what kind of hell could hide behind polished brass and patriotic rhetoric. On a Tuesday evening in October, Dalton was reviewing classified documents about contractor fraud in Afghanistan when his encrypted phone buzzed. Not the regular cell phone, the other one. Larson, he answered. Dad. Mitch's voice was wrong. Tight. Pain wrapped around every syllable. Dalton's entire body went rigid. What happened? I need you to listen. Don't react, just listen. A wet cough. I'm okay. Mostly okay. Mitch. Colonel Gonzalez beat the hell out of me during training today. Said I showed him disrespect. Broke my ribs, Dad. Maybe my jaw. They took me to the base clinic and the doctor, Colonel Johnson, he wrote it up as a training accident. Fall from an obstacle course. Dalton's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. His voice remained perfectly calm. Where are you right now? My barracks. They told me to keep my mouth shut or it gets worse. Said I'm a troublemaker. That I can't handle military discipline. Another pause. Dad, there are 40 guys watching. Not one of them will back me up. Gonzalez has them terrified. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Mitch's story came out in fragments. Morning PT had been brutal. Gonzalez had been on edge all week, screaming at everyone. Mitch had asked a question about proper hydration protocol during a ruck march. A simple by-the-book question. Gonzalez had taken it as insubordination, told him to drop and give him 50. Standard stuff. But then after the company dispersed, Gonzalez had ordered Mitch to stay behind. The colonel had circled him like a predator, asking if he thought he was smarter than his commanding officer. Before Mitch could answer, the first punch had landed in his solar plexus, then his ribs, his face. When Mitch went down, Gonzalez kicked him twice more. He said, "This is what happens to smart asses who think they know better," Mitch whispered. Then he called over Captain Glenn and Lieutenant Johnson. They dragged me to the clinic. Doctor looked at me, looked at Gonzalez, and wrote up the accident report. No questions. Dalton's mind was already working through scenarios, protocols, chains of command. Who else saw it? My whole unit, 42 guys. But Turl Duffy pulled me aside after. He said he wanted to report it, but Gonzalez threatened everyone. Said anyone who talked would find themselves in Afghanistan on the worst details imaginable and that his reach went further than we could imagine. Turl Duffy, Dalton repeated, filing the name away. He sounds like he has some integrity. He's solid, Dad. But he's scared. We all are. Mitch's voice cracked. What do I do? Dalton stood up, already walking to his secure room. You do nothing. You recover. You keep your head down for exactly 48 hours. Can you do that? Yeah, but no, buts. Mitch, I know you want to fight this yourself. I know you're thinking about going to the Inspector General or filing a formal complaint. Don't. That paper trail will get buried or twisted against you. Trust me on this. What are you going to do? Dalton unlocked the secure room, his fingers already pulling up files on his computer. I'm going to remind some people that there are still consequences in this world. I'll call you in 2 days. Stay safe. After hanging up, Dalton sat in silence for exactly 60 seconds. It was an old habit from his intelligence days. 60 seconds to let rage pass, to let emotion drain away, to let the calculating, ruthless part of his mind take control. Then he went to work. Chapter 2, Building the Arsenal. By Wednesday morning, Dalton had read Colonel Charles Gonzalez's entire military file. It wasn't the official file that was sanitized garbage meant for promotion boards. This was the real file, the one that intelligence kept on everyone above a certain rank. The one that listed every allegation, every whisper complaint, every suspicious incident that never quite made it to official channels. Gonzalez was a cancer. 3 separate incidents at previous postings involving excessive force. 2 formal complaints that had been withdrawn after the complainants were suddenly reassigned to career-ending positions. A pattern of behavior that screamed abuse of power, protected by a network of officers who either feared him or benefited from his brutality. The file also showed Gonzalez's protectors, Captain Juan Glenn, his executive officer and loyal enforcer. Lieutenant Colonel Orville Johnson, the base medical officer who'd been covering for Gonzalez for 6 years. Both had their own buried skeletons. Melissa appeared in the doorway with coffee. She learned long ago not to ask questions about the secure room. How bad? Bad enough. Dalton took the coffee, kissed her cheek. He put his hands on her son. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went cold. Melissa Larson had commanded supply convoys through hostile territory in Iraq. She'd lost friends to IEDs and ambushes. She knew exactly what kind of evil could wear a uniform. What do you need from me? She asked. Keep things normal here. If I'm not back in 3 days, call Douglas Flowers at the Pentagon. His direct line. She nodded. Douglas Flowers was the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He and Dalton had worked together on operations that would be classified for the next 50 years. You're going to the base tomorrow morning. I'm going as concerned father, just a civilian who wants answers about his son's training accident. Dalton's smile was cold. I want to see how far they'll take the lie. Wednesday passed in a blur of encrypted calls and careful research. Dalton contacted 3 separate sources inside the Pentagon. People who owed him favors from his intelligence days. He didn't tell them what he was planning. He just asked them to be ready. He also reached out to Dominic O'Connor, a military investigator with the Inspector General's office who'd worked several cases with Dalton. O'Connor was one of the few genuinely honest people in military law enforcement. I need you to tell me about Fort Carson's command climate, Dalton said when O'Connor called him back. That's a specific question. You're looking at someone. Colonel Charles Gonzalez, training commander. A long pause. Jesus, Dalton. What's your interest? Personal. Very personal. Then you should know that Gonzalez is untouchable. 3-star general named Berman thinks he walks on water. We've tried to investigate him twice. Both times the general made it disappear. You're walking into a brick wall. Thank for the warning. Dalton hung up and added General Berman to his list. The rot went higher than he'd thought. That evening, Dalton called Mitch again. His son sounded better. Probably painkillers helping with the ribs. How are you holding up? Angry, but I'm keeping quiet like you said. A pause. Dad, I heard Gonzalez bragging today. Said he broke another weak recruit. That the army needs to weed out the soft ones. He doesn't even think he did anything wrong. Men like him never do. That's going to be his weakness. Dalton kept his voice gentle. I'm coming to the base tomorrow. I'll be there as just your father. No rank, no titles. I want you to hear how they handle a civilian complaint. They'll shut you down hard. I'm counting on it. Mitch, I need you to do something for me. That soldier, Terrell Duffy, is he someone you trust completely with my life? Good. I need you to tell him to document everything he saw. Written statement, dated, signed. He keeps it hidden. Doesn't file it anywhere. Doesn't tell anyone else. Just writes it down exactly as he remembers it. Can he do that? I'll ask him tonight. And Mitch, no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what you hear, trust that I know what I'm doing. Thursday morning, Dalton dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a button-down shirt, work boots. He looked like any blue-collar father coming to sort out a problem with his kids' training. He drove his personal truck, not the government-issued sedan that sat in his garage. Everything about his appearance said ordinary, powerless, forgettable. The drive to Fort Carson took 4 hours. Dalton spent them listening to music and mentally preparing. He'd learned long ago that the key to intelligence work wasn't just gathering information. It was understanding human nature. Pride, arrogance, the certainty that power made you invulnerable. These were the weaknesses he'd exploit. Chapter 3. Walking into the lion's den. The guard at Fort Carson's main gate checked Dalton's ID and waved him through with minimal interest. Just another visitor. Dalton followed the signs to the base headquarters, parked in the civilian lot, and walked inside like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The corporal at the reception desk looked up with practiced boredom. Help you, sir. I'm here to see Colonel Charles Gonzalez. My son is in his training unit. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think the colonel will want to see me. My son had a training accident earlier this week, and I have some questions about how it was handled. The corporal's expression shifted slightly. Sir, if you have concerns about your son's training, you should submit a formal inquiry through. I prefer to speak with Colonel Gonzalez directly. Dalton Larson. My son is Private Mitchell Larson. The name didn't register with the corporal, which was perfect. The kid picked up the phone, spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up. Colonel Gonzalez says he can give you 10 minutes. Building C, 2nd floor. Dalton thanked him and headed across the quad. The morning sun was bright. Soldiers moving in organized formations. The everyday machinery of military life grinding forward. Beautiful and terrible order built on discipline and trust. When that trust was betrayed, the whole structure became a cage. Colonel Gonzalez's office was exactly what Dalton expected. Awards and commendations on the walls, a large desk positioned to put visitors in a psychologically inferior position, photos of the colonel with various dignitaries. A shrine to ego. Gonzalez himself was a compact man. His late 40s, fit, but with the beginning of a gut that suggested too much desk time. His handshake was unnecessarily firm, his smile manufactured. Mr. Larson, I understand you have concerns about your son. I do. Dalton sat without being invited. A subtle power play. Mitch called me Tuesday night. Said he'd been beaten by you during training and that the incident was covered up as an accident. Gonzalez's smile never wavered. Your son is confused, Mr. Larson. Private Larson had an unfortunate fall during obstacle course training. He was treated by our medical staff and cleared to return to duty. If he told you something different, I'm afraid he's either misremembering due to his injuries or he's fabricating a story to avoid responsibility for his own clumsiness. He described the beating in detail. Said you punched him repeatedly after the morning formation, then had your officers file a false report. Mr. Larson, I understand you're concerned about your son, but I have to tell you that Private Larson has shown some disciplinary issues since arriving here. Nothing major, but a pattern of questioning authority, thinking he knows better than his instructors. Gonzalez leaned back in his chair. Sometimes young men who struggle with military discipline create elaborate stories to justify their failures. Dalton let the insult hang in the air for a moment. You're saying my son is a liar? I'm saying he's struggling with the transition to military life. It happens. Some recruits simply aren't cut out for the army. Were there witnesses to this training accident? The entire company was present during morning PT. I have 42 soldiers who can confirm that Private Larson fell during the obstacle course. Not one of them saw anything resembling what your son described. There it was. The lie delivered with absolute confidence. Dalton showed no reaction. I like to speak with some of those witnesses. That's not possible. My soldiers have training schedules to maintain. I'm not going to disrupt unit cohesion because one recruit can't handle the reality of military service. Gonzalez's tone sharpened. Mr. Larson, I've been patient with you out of respect for your concern as a father, but I think we're done here. I'd also like to see the medical report. That's confidential military information. You have no right to access it. Dalton stood slowly, his expression calm. Colonel Gonzalez, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to tell me the truth about what happened to my son. 15 minutes to admit what you did, to file a proper incident report and to face the consequences of your actions. Gonzalez stood as well, his face flushing red. Excuse me? You beat my son. You had your officers cover it up. You've created an environment of fear where 42 soldiers are too terrified to tell the truth. I'm giving you 15 minutes to fix it. Are you threatening me? Gonzalez's voice rose. Let me make something very clear, Mr. Larson. I am a colonel in the United States Army. You are a civilian with no authority on this base. Your son is a liar and a troublemaker. And if you continue to make these baseless accusations, I will have you arrested for harassment and removed from this installation. Dalton checked his watch. 14 minutes. Gonzalez hit a button on his phone. Security, this is Colonel Gonzalez. I need an escort to remove a civilian from my office. Immediately, within 90 seconds, 2 military police officers appeared. Dalton recognized the sergeant, Bud Robertson, according to his name tape. A career MP probably seen 100 difficult situations. This man is making threatening statements, Gonzalez said. I want him escorted off the base and barred from re-entry. Robertson looked uncomfortable but professional. Sir, if you'll come with us, please. Dalton didn't move. 13 minutes, Colonel, remove him. Now, Robertson stepped forward. Sir, I don't want to make this difficult. It won't be difficult, Dalton said quietly. He turned to face Gonzalez directly. I'm going to wait outside this building. 12 minutes from now, the truth about what you've done is going to come crashing down on you. You have that long to get ahead of it. Get him out of here. Robertson and his partner guided Dalton out of the office, down the stairs, and toward the parking lot. They weren't rough, just firm. Robertson said quietly. Sir, I don't know what this is about, but you need to let it go. Colonel Gonzalez doesn't tolerate challenges to his authority. I know exactly what kind of man Colonel Gonzalez is, Dalton replied. That's why I'm here. They left him at his truck with a warning not to return to the building. Dalton leaned against the hood, checking his watch. 9 minutes. Chapter 4, The Countdown. Inside the headquarters building, Colonel Gonzalez paced his office, still furious. Captain Juan Glenn stood near the door, having arrived moments after the civilian was removed. Who the hell was that? Glenn asked. Some nobody, Private Larson's father. Gonzalez dropped into his chair. Came in here making insane accusations. Said I beat his son, though we covered it up. Glenn's expression tightened. What did you tell him? The truth. That his son fell during training, that we have 42 witnesses, and that if he continues harassing us, he'll face legal consequences. Gonzalez waved dismissively. Another desperate parent who can't accept that their precious child isn't special. He seemed pretty confident for someone making baseless accusations. They always are. These people watch too many movies, think they can come onto a military base and demand answers like they're entitled to them. Gonzalez pulled up his email. I'm going to file a report with the Provost Marshal's office. Create a record of his harassment in case he tries to escalate. Outside, Dalton watched the second hand sweep around his watch face. 7 minutes. He'd spent his entire intelligence career understanding timing, knowing when to push, when to wait, when to let someone hang themselves with their own arrogance. Gonzalez was following the script perfectly, dismissing a civilian complaint, hiding behind military authority, confident that his position made him untouchable. 5 minutes, a text message appeared on Dalton's phone. From Douglas Flowers, ready on your signal. Dalton replied, 3 minutes. Inside the Pentagon, Flowers sat in his office reviewing the package Dalton had sent him the previous day. Everything documented, everything verified. Gonzalez's history, Johnson's complicity, the pattern of abuse that had been buried under official silence, and most importantly, the evidence that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systemic failure in command accountability. Flowers had been waiting for someone like Dalton to bring him something like this. The Department of Defense had been hemorrhaging credibility over abuse scandals, and the Secretary had made it clear that the next verifiable case would result in immediate public consequences. No more quiet reassignments. No more protecting bad officers. 3 minutes. Gonzalez was typing an email to General Berman complaining about the civilian intrusion when his desk phone rang. Internal line, unfamiliar extension. Colonel Gonzalez. Colonel, this is Sergeant Robertson, Northern Mariana Islands duty desk. The civilian we removed from your office. Do you want us to file formal trespassing charges? No, just keep him off the base. If he returns, then we'll pursue charges. Gonzalez hung up, satisfied. The situation was contained. 2 minutes. Dalton's phone buzzed. A text from Mitch. Turl wrote everything down. Says he's ready to testify if you need him. Another text, this one from Melissa. Whatever you're doing, I trust you. Come home safe. 1 minute. Dalton walked away from his truck, moving to a bench with a clear view of the headquarters building. The autumn air was crisp, leaves turning gold and red. A beautiful day, the kind of day that made you believe the world was fundamentally good, that justice existed, that monsters couldn't hide forever. 30 seconds inside Gonzalez's office. The colonel was reviewing duty rosters when his desk phone rang again. Different tone. This was an outside line. The caller ID showed a Pentagon prefix. He answered with practiced professionalism. Colonel Gonzalez. Colonel, this is Deputy Under-Secretary Flowers calling from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. We need to discuss Private Mitchell Larson's training incident from Tuesday. Gonzalez froze. The Pentagon didn't call about individual training accidents ever. Sir, I'm not sure I understand. Private Larson had a fall during obstacle course training. It's been documented. And stop talking, Colonel. Flowers' voice was ice. 12 minutes ago. A man named Dalton Larson visited your office. He gave you 15 minutes to tell the truth about what happened to his son. You chose to call security instead. Do you know who Dalton Larson is? Gonzalez's mouth went dry. A civilian, the private's father. Dalton Larson is a senior advisor to this office with top secret/SEC clearance and direct access to the Secretary of Defense. He spent 23 years in military intelligence with operational authority that exceeded yours by several orders of magnitude. When he retired, we kept him on retainer because his expertise is invaluable to national security. The room seemed to tilt. Gonzalez gripped his desk. More importantly, Flowers continued, he's a father whose son was beaten by a commanding officer and then had that assault covered up by corrupt medical personnel. You have exactly 60 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't have you arrested immediately. Chapter 5. The walls close in. Gonzalez's mind raced through possibilities, excuses, escape routes. His instinct was to deny everything, to rely on the same protection that had shielded him for years. Sir, I don't know what Mr. Larson told you, but Private Larson had an accident during I'm going to stop you there, Flowers interrupted. Before you commit yourself to that lie, I want you to know what we have. We have Private Larson's medical records showing injuries inconsistent with a fall, specifically knuckle pattern, bruising, and defensive wounds. We have a sworn statement from a witness who saw you beat Private Larson. We have your service record showing 3 previous allegations of excessive force. We have Lieutenant Colonel Johnson's falsified medical report. And we have a pattern of command climate issues at Fort Carson that suggests systematic abuse being covered up at multiple levels. Gonzalez felt his chest constrict. Sir, I am not finished. In approximately 90 seconds, I'm going to conference in the base commander, the Inspector General, and JAG. They're going to place you under immediate investigation. Your command authority will be suspended. Every soldier in your unit will be interviewed separately. Every report you filed in the last year will be audited. Do you understand what's happening? Yes, sir. Gonzalez's voice was barely a whisper. Then I'm going to ask you one question, and your answer will determine whether you spend the rest of your life in prison or merely lose your career and pension. Did you physically assault Private Mitchell Larson on Tuesday morning? The silence stretched for 5 eternal seconds. Yes, sir, I did. Outside, Dalton saw the exact moment it happened. Through the second-floor window, he could see Gonzalez slump in his chair, head in hands. The colonel's entire world was collapsing, and it had taken exactly 12 minutes from the time he called security. Dalton's phone buzzed. Flowers, he confessed. Moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 was where things got interesting. Inside the office, Gonzalez was still on the phone when Captain Glenn burst through the door. Colonel, I just had a call from the Provost Marshal. They're sending investigators. Gonzalez held up a hand to silence him, still listening to Flowers. You will remain in your office, Flowers was saying. You will not contact Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, Captain Glenn, or any other officer involved in this cover-up. You will not access any files or computers. You will not leave the base. Investigators will arrive within 2 hours to take your formal statement. Is this clear? Yes, sir. Put me on speaker. Gonzalez pressed the button. Glenn's face had gone pale. This is Deputy Undersecretary Flowers speaking to everyone in that office. As of this moment, Colonel Gonzalez has been relieved of command authority pending investigation. Captain Glenn, you are ordered to report to the base legal office immediately. Do not discuss this case with anyone. Do not attempt to contact witnesses or alter any documents. Failure to comply will result in criminal charges. Acknowledge. Glenn's voice shook. Understood, sir. You have destroyed the trust that is fundamental to military service. You have betrayed the soldiers under your command, and you have learned the hardest lesson there is. That rank does not make you invulnerable, and that eventually someone more powerful will hold you accountable. Flowers paused. Mr. Larson is still on that base. If anything happens to him or his son, if they experience even the slightest retaliation, I will personally ensure that every officer involved spends the maximum time in Leavenworth. Get out of my army. The line went dead. Gonzalez sat in his chair, stunned. Everything he'd built. 24 years of service, his reputation, his authority. Gone in 12 minutes because he'd underestimated a civilian in jeans and work boots. Glenn stood frozen. What do we do? Nothing. There's nothing we can do. Gonzalez looked up, and for the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. He knew. Larson knew exactly what would happen. He gave me 15 minutes to confess because he'd already put everything in motion. The phone call, the investigation, all of it. He set a timer and watched me walk into it. Who is he? Someone we should never have with. Chapter 6. The reckoning spreads. Within the hour, the base was in controlled chaos. Military investigators from the Inspector General's office arrived with sealed orders. The base commander, a 2-star general, made an emergency call to the Pentagon and emerged from his office looking shaken. Every soldier in Gonzalez's training company was separated and interviewed individually. Dalton remained on the base, now with official authorization. The provost marshal himself apologized for the earlier removal, explaining that he hadn't been briefed on the situation. Dalton accepted the apology with grace, but his focus was elsewhere. He went to find his son. Mitch was in the barracks when Dalton arrived. The kid stood quickly, wincing from his ribs, and Dalton saw the full extent of the damage for the first time. Yellow-purple bruising across Mitch's jaw, the way he held his left side, the split lip that was still healing. Dad, Mitch said quietly. I heard what happened. The whole base is talking about it. Dalton pulled his son into a careful hug, mindful of the injuries. How are you holding up? Better now. Scared before, but better now. Mitch pulled back. What you did? I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. No one hurts my son and gets away with it. Dalton guided Mitch to sit on his bunk. The investigators are going to want to interview you. Tell them everything exactly as it happened. Don't minimize it. Don't exaggerate it. Just the truth. What's going to happen to Gonzalez? Court-martial at minimum. Probably prison time. His career is over. Dalton's expression hardened. But he's not the only one. Johnson falsified medical records. Glenn helped cover it up. And there's a 3-star general named Berman who's been protecting Gonzalez for years. They're all going down. Mitch shook his head in disbelief. I thought I'd have to just take it, live with it. Maybe get reassigned and try to forget. Never. You should never have to live with injustice, especially not from people who were supposed to lead you. Dalton squeezed his son's shoulder. The Army is built on values. Honor, integrity, duty. When officers violate those values, they destroy everything the uniform represents. What happened to you wasn't just assault. It was a betrayal of everything military service is supposed to mean. There was a knock on the door. Dominic O'Connor stood there in his investigator's uniform looking apologetic. Mr. Larson, Private Larson, I'm here to conduct the formal interview. Dalton stood. Dominic, glad it's you handling this. I wish we caught it earlier, O'Connor said grimly. But we're catching it now, Private Larson. If you're ready, I need you to walk me through everything that happened Tuesday morning. As Mitch gave his statement, Dalton stepped outside to take call. It was Turl Duffy, Mitch's friend. Mr. Larson, they just interviewed me. I told them everything I saw. Duffy's voice was steady but emotional. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have. You're speaking up now. That's what matters. Dalton kept his tone gentle. You were in an impossible situation. Gonzalez had created an environment where speaking the truth meant destroying your career. That's not on you. Still feels like I failed. Mitch, you didn't. You're standing up now when it counts. That takes courage. After the call, Dalton walked back toward the headquarters building. He saw Gonzalez being escorted out by 2 MPs. His service pistol already confiscated, his bearing no longer that of a confident commander, but of a man who knew his life was over. Their eyes met for a moment. Gonzalez looked away first. Chapter 7. The dominoes fall. The investigation moved with brutal efficiency. Within 48 hours, the full scope of Gonzalez's pattern of abuse became clear. He'd been systematically terrorizing soldiers for 6 years, using fear and the cover of tough training to mask what amounted to criminal assault. 17 soldiers came forward with their own stories, incidents that have been buried or explained away. Lieutenant Colonel Orville Johnson cracked under questioning. The base medical officer admitted to falsifying at least a dozen reports covering up Gonzalez's violence. He'd done it because Gonzalez had dirt on him. Johnson had been having an affair with a subordinate officer and Gonzalez had threatened to expose it unless Johnson cooperated. The confession was damning, pathetic, and sealed Johnson's fate. Captain Juan Glenn tried to lawyer up, but his involvement was too clear. He'd witnessed multiple assaults and not only failed to report them, but actively intimidated soldiers who wanted to come forward. His military career ended with a dishonorable discharge recommendation, but the real prize was General Berman. The 3-star had been Gonzalez's protector, the power behind the throne, who'd made previous investigations disappear. Dalton's contacts and Pentagon intelligence pulled Man's communications, and what they found was worse than anyone expected. Berman hadn't just protected Gonzalez. He'd actively cultivated a network of abusive officers across multiple bases, believing that hard men made better soldiers. His philosophy was that modern army had gone soft, that political correctness had weakened military effectiveness, and that officers like Gonzalez were necessary to maintain proper discipline. It was a cancer that had metastasized throughout an entire command structure. Douglas Flowers personally delivered Berman's termination notice. The general was given a choice. Retire immediately with reduced rank and a letter of reprimand in his file or face court-martial for dereliction of duty and conduct on becoming an officer. He chose retirement, but the damage to his legacy was permanent. Dalton watched these dominoes fall with cold satisfaction. This wasn't just about his son anymore. It was about cutting out rot that had been poisoning the army for years. On Friday afternoon, he sat with Mitch in the base coffee shop. His son looked better, the swelling in his jaw going down, moving with less pain. "Dad, they're offering me a transfer to a different unit. Said I could leave Fort Carson, start fresh somewhere else." Mitch wrapped his hand around his coffee cup. "What do you think I should do?" "What do you want to do?" "I want to stay. I want to finish my training here with my unit. I don't want Gonzalez to have driven me out." Dalton smiled. "Then stay. Show them what kind of soldier you really are." "But what about the other guys? The ones who didn't speak up? They're saying I'm a snitch, that I broke the code. Some of them will think that. Some of them will respect you for having the courage they didn't. And some of them will realize that there's no honor in protecting monsters." Dalton leaned forward. "Mitch, you're going to have a choice every day of your military career. You could be the kind of soldier who looks the other way when bad things happen. Or you could be the kind who stands up for what's right even when it's hard. That choice defines who you are. You made it look easy. It wasn't easy. It was necessary. There's a difference." Dalton's expression softened. "I had resources most people don't have. I had connections, experience, authority. Most soldiers in your position wouldn't be able to do what I did. That's why the system has to work. So that people without power can still get justice. Did the system work this time? Yes, because I forced it to. But that's the problem. It shouldn't require someone like me to make the system function. It should work on its own." Dalton sighed. "That's what we're trying to fix now. New policies, better oversight, protections for whistleblowers. It won't be perfect, but it'll be better than what you went through." Chapter 8. The trial. 6 months later, Dalton sat in the courtroom at Fort Leavenworth for Gonzalez's court-martial. The proceeding was open to the public, a deliberate choice by the Judge Advocate General's office to demonstrate transparency. Gonzalez sat at the defense table looking smaller than Dalton remembered. Prison time awaiting trial had aged him, stripped away the arrogant bearing. He was facing 12 charges. Assault, battery, conduct on becoming an officer, dereliction of duty, falsifying official documents, and witness intimidation. The prosecution was methodical and devastating. They presented Mitch's testimony, Terrell Duffy's eyewitness account, medical evidence, and statement from 16 other soldiers Gonzalez had abused. They showed the pattern of behavior, the cover-ups, the systematic betrayal of trust. Gonzalez's defense attorney tried to argue that his client had been enforcing legitimate military discipline, that soldiers today were too soft, that a certain level of physical confrontation was normal in training environments. The argument fell flat. This wasn't discipline. It was sadism with a uniform. Dalton testified as well, not about the incident itself, but about his investigation and what he'd found. He kept his testimony factual, clinical, devastating. He detailed how he'd built the case, contacted the Pentagon, and given Gonzalez the chance to come clean. He described the colonel's arrogance, his certainty that rank made him untouchable. "Did you intend for this case to go public?" the prosecutor asked. "Absolutely," Dalton replied. "Not for revenge, but for accountability. If we'd handled this quietly with a simple reassignment and a sealed file, the message would have been that officers who abuse their power can still walk away. I wanted every soldier in the Army to know that there are consequences, that the system can work, that speaking up matters." The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was harsh. Gonzalez received 8 years in military prison, dishonorable discharge, loss of all rank and benefits. He'd entered the Army as an idealistic lieutenant and left it as a convicted felon in his 50s with no pension, no prospects, and a criminal record that would follow him forever. Johnson got 4 years and a dishonorable discharge. Glenn got 2 years and was stripped of his commission. General Berman wasn't prosecuted criminally, but his retirement was at reduced rank, his legacy destroyed. He'd been mentioned by name in the Secretary of Defense's public statement about the case, identified as a failed leader who'd enabled abuse through neglect and misguided loyalty. After the sentencing, Dalton met Mitch outside the courthouse. His son was in dress uniform now, a specialist's rank on his shoulders. He'd finished his training, excelled in his follow-on schooling, and was about to deploy with a Ranger unit. "It's really over," Mitch said. "This part is, but the work continues." Dalton looked at his son with pride. "You're going to see a lot in your career. Good leaders and bad ones, systems that work and systems that fail. Remember this. Remember that one person standing up can change everything." "I will. And Dad." Mitch's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me. Always, son. Always." Chapter 9. Aftermath and Legacy. 1 year after Gonzalez's conviction, Dalton sat in a Pentagon briefing room with Douglas Flowers and a team of military reform advocates. They were presenting a new training initiative based on the Larson case, mandatory reporting systems, independent investigations for all abuse allegations, protections against retaliation, and a complete overhaul of how command climate was assessed. The Larson case became a turning point, Flowers told the assembled officers. Not because of the abuse itself. Tragically, we've had too many of those. But because it demonstrated that transparency and accountability could work, that we could excise rot without destroying the institution. Dalton listened, but didn't speak. This wasn't his show anymore. He'd done what he needed to do. Protected his son, exposed corruption, forced the system to work. Now, it was up to others to make sure the changes stuck. After the briefing, he drove home to Alexandria. Melissa was in the kitchen making dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filling the house. She kissed him when he walked in. "How was it?" "Productive. They're actually listening." Dalton loosened his tie. "Maybe something good comes out of all this." "It already has." Mitch called earlier. His unit commander praised him in front of the whole company. Said he was the kind of soldier the Army needed. Someone with both courage and integrity. Dalton smiled. That was worth more than any medal or accommodation. That evening, he sat in his study going through emails when one caught his attention. It was from Terrell Duffy, now a sergeant and working as a military instructor himself. "Mr. Larson, I wanted you to know that I tell your son's story to every class I teach. Not the whole thing, but the important parts. That speaking up matters. That one person can make a difference. That rank doesn't make someone right. Some of the instructors don't like it. They think I'm undermining the chain of command. But the students get it. They understand that real leadership means protecting the people who serve under you, not abusing them. Thank you for showing us what that looks like, Terrell." Dalton read the email twice, then forwarded it to Mitch with a simple message. "You started something important. Proud of you." 3 years later, Dalton was invited to speak at West Point's Ethics Symposium. He stood in front of 300 future officers and told them the story of what happened when his son was beaten by a colonel who thought he was untouchable. Leadership isn't about rank or authority. Dalton told them it's about character. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, even when everyone around you is choosing the easy path of looking the other way. He paused, looking at the young faces staring back at him. Some of you will face situations like the one my son faced. You'll see abuse, corruption, or incompetence, and you'll have to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. I can't tell you what to do in those moments. But I can tell you this, the measure of a leader isn't how they act when everyone is watching. It's how they act when no one is watching. When the only thing holding them accountable is their own conscience. After the speech, a young cadet approached him. "Sir, what you did for your son using your connections, your power. That's not something most people can do. What about soldiers who don't have a father in the Pentagon?" It was a good question, an honest question. "You're right," Dalton acknowledged. "Most people don't have the resources I had. That's exactly why we changed the system. Now, there are independent investigators, protected reporting channels, and policies against retaliation. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. But what if the system fails them? Then they do what my son did. They document everything. They find one person they can trust and they refuse to be silenced. Sometimes speaking up destroys your career. Sometimes it gets you ostracized or punished. But the alternative, staying silent while people in power abuse that power that destroys your soul." The cadet nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." As Dalton drove back to Washington, he thought about that question. The system was better now, but it wasn't perfect. There would be other Gonzales out there, other corrupt officers, other soldiers who needed someone to fight for them. But there would also be more people like Mitch, like Terrell, like the thousands of soldiers who learned from this case that accountability mattered. That evening, Dalton had dinner with Mitch, who was on leave between deployments. His son had been promoted to staff sergeant, had earned a combat infantry badge, and was being recommended for officer candidate school. "I got the OCS acceptance," Mitch said over dinner. "I'll be commissioning as a second lieutenant next year. How do you feel about that?" "Excited, nervous, determined to be the kind of officer I wish I'd had from the beginning." Mitch paused. "I've been thinking a lot about leadership, about what it means to be responsible for other people's lives and careers. And what have you concluded? That the only thing that matters is whether the people under your command can trust you, not fear you, trust that you'll make good decisions, that you'll listen when they have concerns, that you'll protect them from injustice even if it costs you something." Mitch met his father's eyes. "You taught me that not with words, but by showing me what it looked like." Dalton felt a lump in his throat. "You're going to be a great officer, Mitch. Better than I ever was." "I doubt that, but I'm going to try." They talked late into the night, father and son, about service and sacrifice and the thin line between discipline and abuse. About the burden of leadership and the responsibility of power. About how hard it was to do the right thing in a world that often rewarded doing the wrong thing. Later, after Mitch had left, Dalton sat his study and pulled up the final investigation report on the Gonzales case. 17 soldiers who'd been abused had come forward. 12 had left the army entirely, traumatized by what they'd endured. 5 had stayed and were thriving under new leadership. But the real impact was harder to measure. How many other abusive officers have been stopped because of increased oversight? How many soldiers felt safer reporting misconduct because they'd seen the system actually work? How many leaders had changed their behavior because they knew they could no longer hide behind rank? There was no way to know for sure, but Dalton chose to believe it had mattered. Years later, when Dalton was fully retired and Mitch was a decorated captain leading his own company, they visited Fort Carson together. The base had been transformed. New leadership, new training protocols, a completely different culture. They stopped by the memorial that had been erected for soldiers who died in training accidents. A simple stone wall with names and dates. Honest accounting of loss, no cover-ups, no falsified reports. "This is what accountability looks like," Mitch said quietly. "Truth, even when it's painful." Dalton put his arm around his son's shoulders. "You know what the best part of this whole thing is? It's not that Gonzales went to prison. It's not even that the system changed. It's that you came through it stronger. You didn't let what happened make you bitter or cynical. You used it to become the kind of leader who would never do to someone else what was done to you." "I had a good example," Mitch replied. They stood there together as the sun set over the base. Father and son, both understanding that the fight for justice was never really over. There would always be people who abused power, who covered up crimes, who thought rank made them invulnerable. But there would also always be people who stood up to them. People who refused to be silenced. People who believed that doing the right thing mattered even when it was hard. And sometimes, just sometimes, those people won. Epilogue. Colonel Charles Gonzales was released from military prison after serving 6 years of his 8-year sentence. He moved to a small town in Montana, worked as a night shift security guard, and died alone in his apartment at age 67. His obituary made no mention of his military service. Lieutenant Colonel Orville Johnson lost his medical license and spent his prison sentence working in the facility library. After release, he worked as a medical billing clerk. He never practiced medicine again. Captain Juan Glenn was dishonorably discharged and struggled to find work. He eventually started a small business that failed within 2 years. He declared bankruptcy at age 45. General Barman's name was quietly removed from a building at the Command and General Staff College. He gave no interviews, wrote no memoirs, and lived in obscurity until his death at 72. Staff Sergeant Terrell Duffy commissioned as an officer and eventually rose to the rank of major. He became an advocate for military ethics and spoke openly about the importance of protecting soldiers from abusive leadership. Captain Mitchell Larson served with distinction for 15 years before transitioning to the private sector. He remained close with his father and often spoke publicly about the importance of accountability and leadership. Dalton Larson continued consulting for the Department of Defense until his final retirement at age 65. He and Melissa traveled extensively, spent time with grandchildren, and lived quietly in Alexandria. He gave occasional speeches on ethics and leadership, but mostly preferred to let his actions speak for themselves. The reforms implemented after the Larson case became standard protocol across all military branches. While abuse still occurred, the rate of successful prosecutions increased by 340% and anonymous reporting led to earlier interventions before patterns of abuse could become entrenched. Not everyone was saved. Not every injustice was corrected. But the system was better than it had been. And that had to be enough. Because in the end, justice isn't about perfect outcomes. It's about people choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard. Even when they could get away with doing nothing. Even when the easier path is to look the other way. Dalton Larson looked at his son beaten and bloodied and chose to fight. That choice changed everything.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.